Welcome to the Midweek in Gaming podcast. And what do you know? It's been a big week in gaming. I'm into go for episode 78.5 for Wednesday. Almost threw me. Wednesday.
Jeez.
The 4th of May, 2022. In this week's show, we'll be discussing Elden Ring, and more Elden Ring.
Woo-hoo.
Let's get on with the show.
Elden Ring. I never played Elden Ring.
You can find all of our links in the description or at bigwigpod.com. So what are we doing? We are doing the Elden Ring spoiler cut / review. Finally, after 2 months. Swinny, how are we breaking up this review?
So we're breaking it up. The first half will be just more of a formal review where we will have no major spoilers. There might be some light spoilers here and there, but mainly regarding just how we thought about overall concepts and mechanics and things like that. So if you don't want to be spoiled that there's a new type of flask in the game, then don't listen to this review.
There's flasks in the game?
What?
There's flasks in the game?
We should have a spoiler. We should have had a spoiler button where it goes. Wah, wah.
Just mute me for the rest of the podcast.
And then the second,
just to be safe.
The second half will be the spoiler chat where there's no holds barred there. It's extreme rules, it's extreme spoilers. We will be talking about our builds, how we play through the game, our favorite quests, our favorite, like some of the coolest moments, our favorite locations and bosses and story and lore and whatever the fuck else we want to talk about.
Whoa. I'm going to put this warning up whenever people break the rules. Spoiler alert.
Did you mean to misspell?
Did I
Spoiler
alert.
do you know what's better about that? Because you know it's real. You know that I made it then.
I'm impressed that you got a pretty close approximation of the font. That's pretty cool.
I'm like debating whether I boot up Photoshop and it could crash the whole stream.
No. This is better. Leave the spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. I feel like from now on we're going to say spoiler alert. So yeah, let's jump into the intro. So maybe we can give the overall, as the most minimal spoilers version of it.
Because I'm telling you,
Mike is going to spoil it.
No, I'm not.
A little bit.
I'm not going to spoil it.
Okay. So Elden Ring, PC, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S. So wait, that actually made me kind of stop for a second. So even on the Xbox One OG, you can play Elden Ring. I haven't seen anyone play it on that.
Yeah, just like you can play on PS4.
Wow, that'd be intense. So it came out in the 25th of Feb 2022 after a small, tiny little delay.
It was just yesterday, wasn't it? This
It
review is
feels like
very on
yesterday,
time.
yeah.
Well, no, but we didn't want to rush it like other reviewers who didn't finish the game completely, didn't clock the game completely. Unbelievable.
Had to literally get platinum / the equivalent all achievements on Xbox to be able to fairly review this game.
Yeah. So do you want to first just sort of give a state of play as to, our lineage with the Souls series? How many hours did we beat it? Did we clock the game? All
Sure.
that kind of stuff?
Maybe also introduce ourselves in the meantime because we forgot to do it at the start.
Oh, yeah, we did, didn't we?
So
I
how
already
about
said
you,
I'm
Into
into God. As always, I'm joined by Mike
Hello, people of the internet.
and Swinny.
Who's winning?
That's this guy. No,
Let's
wait.
do it again.
Man, why is this? I'm always so confused.
I know. Even when I say to
mirrored.
myself, I got to point the other
guy.
direction. Oh, I
Yeah.
did it at first go that time. No, you did it the wrong way.
No, I just said I'm going to do it that way. Whatever it is, I don't care.
So maybe I'll open the
My
batting.
wall.
So I am the least experienced with the Souls series. I've beaten Dark Souls, played a little bit of Demon Souls, and we'll go back and play all the Souls series apart from Dark Souls 2 because that doesn't count. Sekiro, all the real Souls games.
For audio listeners, that is a load of shit. That's what that is. I thought my expression on video wasn't enough. I need to verbalize that.
Yeah, it comes through the audio waves. So I played it on PS5. I played it at launch. And I think I put in about 70 hours. And I just actually booted it up again last night. So I hadn't played it since basically launch. How about you, Mike?
Respectable amount. So I have experienced with all the Souls games, and I mean all of them, including Sekiro, which I think, Swinny, technically means I have experienced one extra Souls game than you have.
You've experienced 2 extra Souls games than me.
2?
Actually, 3 extra Souls games than me. Yes.
Which other ones?
He is better
oh, yeah,
than
'cause you didn't play the...
No, Mike, remember,
Yo.
he is better than people who play Bloodborne.
Hey, we haven't gotten up to my
He
thing
is.
yet.
He's
I've
never
got
played
a-
it,
I've-
but
I've
he's
got a-
clocked it without playing it.
I have a specific note about that. Don't spoil
Yeah.
my section.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to spoil your
Thank you.
section.
Thank you.
I would like to, however, say, all jokes aside, that that guy,
They.
Swinny, they, are way more experienced in these games than I am, I reckon, and better at them too. So,
How can we
I think he
PvP,
is.
PvP,
Well, no.
PvP?
all the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is the fact that he did it as with Soul Level 1 in Dark Souls.
That's true.
I
All right.
don't have that achievement.
Let's agree with that.
I don't have
Let's
that
agree
feat.
with that. That is the best achievement out of the three of us. So he's
Totally,
leading. Yeah,
absolutely.
I've
I'm not even kidding.
I've been scarred by competitive multiplayer against Mike in the past. He wins everything.
No,
Gears
I
of
think
War,
you-
Gears of
no,
War.
no.
If
Not-
it's not a
not in
if
Souls
it's,
games.
if it's not a fighting game, Mike is just like freakishly adept at every game.
FPS. No,
No,
but FPSs in
in Souls
particular.
games.
He's a freak of nature.
So back to the Souls games. So I got this one on PS5. And
the correct
played
platform.
it. Well, yeah, I'd say so because
God,
the
you're
frame
just
rate was
throwing
ever so
bombs-
slightly better.
Throwing bombs early. What's going on? Sheesh.
Just have to diss people on Xbox. Him and his Star Trek T-shirt.
No, yeah, it's May the 4th be with you.
So yeah, I've been playing it since launch, and I think all up, it's actually probably closer to 160 hours, about 155, I think ish.
Well,
I
let's
lost
get it
track.
right. Let's get it
Somewhere
accurate.
between 150 and 160. I think more towards 160.
I trusted
honest.
you 2 days ago when you said 150. So that's,
Yeah. Well, I thought it was that, but I'm pretty sure it's more closer to 160.
Now, how do we know?
Regardless, 150, 160, who gives a shit? It's a lot of
Maybe
hours.
he's not played any of these
It's
Souls games.
basically literally an entire week worth of playing the game every day, 24 hours a day, if you look at it that way. There's
quite sad, isn't it?
164 hours in a week?
144, right?
No, 164, I thought.
168, isn't it?
This is a deep
68,
analysis
sorry.
people came
Yeah.
to for Elden
So,
Ring.
yeah,
right?
exactly.
So Swinny's played it for a week.
So
Give
he's
him the
actually played
credit.
it for literally over a week.
Well, let me talk.
But over to you, Swinny.
See,
Tell us about your
You want to
experience.
talk? You
We
just
spoiled
do the whole
everything.
show. You do
Let me
the
just
whole
read
show.
what he's done.
We've done a poor job here. Let's start the show again. So I beat the main game, and I didn't do like all of the side quests, obviously. Whereas Mike, you
I've done
beat the main game
everything.
and pretty much done everything.
I think literally, yeah, everything there is to do. I think. We'll talk. I think about some of the finer details that way, but I'm pretty sure. So I've got a platinum in it, and I've got all the talismans that I know, having now looked at the wiki.
Hey, remember we're
Yeah,
not
and
going
all
to
that
get into
stuff.
spoilery stuff.
No, this isn't spoiler. I'm just saying I've got everything there is to
Spoiler,
basically get.
spoiler.
Now,
Spoiler,
Swinny,
spoiler.
this is why I told you that no matter what you say, he is gonna spoil.
But I
things.
didn't spoil anything. Saying there's talismans in the game isn't a
Okay,
spoiler.
okay. You got pretty much everything. That's all you need to say for this
Yeah.
section. Yes.
So other than the things you can't really get in a single playthrough.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I am very experienced with Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. So I have no experience in Demon Souls, Bloodborne, or Sekiro. Now, what they were alluding to is that I have very high insight into many of these games.
I think you
Obviously,
were gonna say incel or something. For a second.
insight, which is, just by saying that is obviously means I know quite a bit about Bloodborne. So I've watched a lot of that content because I never had a PS4. So what are you doing, Mike? What are you?
Put on my
You're
forehead.
just messing with the show. What are
I'm
you
listening.
doing? All right. Okay.
That's
okay.
it. That's it.
Spoiler. All right. We've got a spoiler counter. Okay.
Spoiler. So he's
All right,
already given
right.
one spoiler.
I'll forgive that. So
what?
I know a lot about the games that I haven't played simply because I got so obsessed with the Dark Souls games, but I never had a PS3, I never had a PS4, so I never got to play Demon Souls and Bloodborne. But
And because you're a huge nerd.
and the reason, okay, thank you, and the reason why I haven't played through Sekiro yet is just that it hadn't felt right. Like, I'm like, okay, I'll play that game eventually. I know a lot about that game, but not as much as I do as those other games.
Yeah, man, you
So-
gotta turn the spa on. You gotta get the
But-
champagne ready. You gotta get the lube
Alright.
going.
When it comes to
Wow, wow.
all right, when it comes to the Dark Souls games, though, I've played through them countless times.
Yeah.
Dark Souls 1 especially,
How many
most-
times? Ballpark.
maybe about 20 times.
Whoa,
I believe that. Yeah.
that's crazy. What's the highest
So-
New Game Plus count that you're at? Because this is on different formats, I'm guessing.
I haven't gone up to like New Game +7 or anything. It's more.
okay.
I think I've gone up to +3 before, but
Oh, yeah,
that's
cool.
the furthest I've gone. So, but
Damn.
so that's basically. And I put a lot of time into this game. I put probably about 180 hours into Elden Ring, playing on Xbox Series X. So that is, I guess that covers all three of us in terms of what we're playing it on and how much we played. And I just like Mike. I essentially did everything I could do in one playthrough, with a couple of things that, look, we can't explain, but there's things where if you don't do it, you miss it. You don't know it, you don't know it, you know. So
Like
it's
which one, for example?
I'm not going to talk about that because that's a spoiler.
Damn it!
All right,
So close.
So 400 hours all up, Swinny,
combined, yeah.
combined. Sekiro always makes me nervous because that seems so hard, that game. There's ways to cheese this game to a degree.
Yeah, you can't really cheese that.
You can't really cheese Sekiro. So, but maybe can we just like call out at a high level before we do any more spoilers? Maybe the TLDR version. Do you recommend this game, Swinny?
Oh, nah. It's a piece of shit. Of course, I recommend it. I don't think it's going to be for everyone, but I think that I would recommend this to probably 80% of people who play games. There's a small group of people that just it won't appeal to. But this is, to me, out of all the FromSoft Souls-like games, the most accessible. So I think it would be something I recommend to many people.
How about you, Mike? That was kind of your cue.
I recommend it as much as I would recommend Snoo Snoo. So painful, but really good.
Can we just put him a point on the Spolier counter just for that?
Why?
I'll
There's
accept
no
it.
spoiler in Snoo Snooing.
I'll accept
Oh,
it.
god damn it.
Spoiler too. Yeah, I echo your sentiments, Winnie. But I'd probably go further. I'd go, if there's only one open world game you could play, I think it would be fine if this was it. If this was your only choice you could make, because it touches on the awesome combat. Oh, I'm getting a little bit spoiler.
Saying it has awesome combat, I don't know.
No, but I'm already thinking in my head. And just the nature of the open world, it's to me right up there with all sort of other open world games. Yeah, it's absolutely to me a must play game. It's a generation defining game. I do wonder in 10 years time how it will stack up, but
Which generation though? Because it's across multiple generations.
And
you played it on PS4, so
I was going to
I played it on
save this
PS5.
line.
What are you talking
but
about?
the PS4 copy of it.
No, I played PS5 copy.
You ended up okay.
I
was
regret
going to
doing that
save
as well.
I was going to save this line for the end, but I think it makes sense for a TLDR, which is the industry needed this game. It needed a game of this
Yes.
caliber.
And that's a lot saying someone from, the Assassin's Creed ilk. All right, well, yes. So that's the TLDR. Strongly recommend. Did we say strongly recommend? Highly strongly recommend.
You just spoiled the end of it when
That's
we were
fine.
going to recommend or not recommend the game.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Now
Spoiler, please.
we are going to go into different parts of the game. I think it's going to be ultra light spoilers. That's what we're aiming for, yeah, Mike?
Yeah. I'm gonna be good, man. I'm gonna be good.
Well, you've already
The
got two.
Spoilers are absolute bullshit that I
Well,
received.
this was
but
meant to
whatever.
be zero spoilers, the first segment. So it's like you've already breached through. All right, let's get on with it. So world design, Swinny.
Yeah, so I thought that would, given this is an open world game and it's from Software's first open world Souls game, I thought it would be good to kind of just talk about what are you doing? What are you doing? It's a spoiler for past games.
I feel like this is one of the few episodes you probably want to watch the video just because of
Yeah.
the antics.
So just talking about how they approached it, an open world versus the content and the areas that are more traditional for what a Souls game would be. So just kind of talking about what we felt, I guess, worked there. Did we feel that the balance? You know, this is they had such a task ahead of themselves in terms of this doing an open world game, and they went above and beyond. So I don't know, Mike, what do you reckon? How did they approach the open world design?
Extremely well, I would say. So it's truly a proper open world. It is restricted in some ways. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a Metrovania kind of game, but there are certain parts. There are certain parts where the world design obviously restricts progress through certain means. However, it also does actually leave you the ability to get to certain areas by bypassing things that most people I think will feel they have to do. But the reality is, if you kind of look around and scope the place out, there's ways of bypassing a couple of major sections in the game. Therefore, I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, making certain encounters optional. So I think in terms of the world design, it's fantastic. One thing that it's not a gripe about the game or anything like that, but there are certain areas that felt a little repeated in some ways, and I'm mostly talking about the concept of the ever goals. But it makes sense in that kind of a game that you would repeat certain things like that. And I think, some of the catacombs, for example, I think were not necessarily because they're not repeated in terms of the level design per se, but as a concept and as a way of reusing certain elements, it did feel a little bit like after, the 10th one, I'm like, all right, here we go again kind of thing. But at the same time, it was a really cool reprieve. Is that the right word I'm looking for? Reprieve from the open world. Reprieve, because it felt more small and structured, and I think it was almost, I was almost looking forward to them sometimes, even though I knew it wasn't going to be anything super different. It was kind of cool because it was something different.
It's ever jails, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ever jails, yeah.
So I didn't like those. I sort of ended up skipping them all because I don't know, something about it was just like, I don't know, there's something about I just didn't like about the way that they executed those. I'd sort of go in, beat the boss. I'm like, okay, yeah, like you get an okay item.
I mean, that's all it is,
times.
yeah. That's literally all it is. It's just a slightly tougher encounter on a one-to-one.
It's one of the few things in the whole game that almost took me out of the game. It made it feel more like a game than a world. But outside of that, it's so hard, right? Like, you guys plumbed this game, every facet of it and everything like that. And we all started playing it blind. Obviously, you guys didn't play it blind late in the game, but we all started playing it blind, and I wasn't going to go through everything the first go. So you've got to cater for folks like me. It's like keeping it interesting as you go through, but then also folks like you just having that depth there.
OCD.
I think for the most part, they did like an amazing job, like an absolutely amazing job. But I do stand by, I think the game is just unnecessarily lengthy. Like, you just didn't need all of the content. Like, they put it all in there and it's kind of crazy. But, and I know we're going to cover this a little bit later, so I'll sort of like, go back to the world design. But the one thing I wanted to loop back to was the open world nature. And when I came into this game, it was just kind of like, okay, I love Dark Souls, thought that was so awesome. I'm going to go into this game, don't want to know too much about it, right? So we mostly skip the trailers and everything like that. And then, you go in the open world and it's like, oh, okay, cool. This is very similar to Breath of the Wild, a game that I love so much. And then you get up to these legacy dungeons and I'm like, holy shit. Like, these are full on, to me, Dark Souls level dungeons as well as open world, which is the fairest criticism of Breath of the Wild, that they've got this awesome open world and no dungeons effectively. You've got these mini dungeons, but this game, I don't know, what did you guys think of the legacy dungeons? I absolutely loved them.
You go first, Swinny.
Yeah, for me, I love what they did with the open world, but and we'll get into kind of the game size part discussion a little bit later, but to me it was quite telling that the moments that I was enjoying the game the most was when it felt closer, when the level design was closer to what the Souls games were. So that's essentially those legacy dungeons, and I think it's just because that design, and we kind of scoffed at it, but it's true. It links back to the almost like a Metroidvania philosophy of unlocking shortcuts and gaining access to things that are then going to allow you to get further into those areas. Now it's not quite in depth in that, but that's something about just kind of learning an area and clearing it out, and having layers on top of layers in those areas that you don't get really with like an open field that has some cliffs and, as you said, like the Everjails and things, which, that content I liked. Like a lot of those, for instance, a lot of the things you got from those had really good lore in them, and that's why I really appreciated getting those. But that is where it is much closer to other traditional open world games, when you've essentially got things on the map that are like, okay, we're going to put 3 Everjails in this area, we're going to put 2 Everjails in that area, and so and so and so. But when it comes to legacy dungeons, that they would easily my favorite part of the game, playing through those.
Yeah. I think so.
I agree.
Too.
Yeah. But what I think I liked, sorry, in TIMECODES is that it had a mix of all these different elements that you could enjoy. It had the open world, which is a different type of gameplay, I think, to some extent, especially because you can use torrent. Not a spoiler or anything, but it's a horse effectively that you can ride, and it changes the gameplay quite a bit as well. I actually didn't use them all that much. I did most of the thing on foot, but it is a different kind of feel to the game. But even within that, there were certain areas where you're like, how the heck do I get up there, or how do I do that particular thing? And there was an awesome sense of exploration within that. That was quite a bit of a stark contrast to getting into a hero's grave, for example, and the little puzzles that are involved in that. And again, it just felt different as a mechanic almost, which once again felt completely different to some extent to the legacy dungeons, which me personally, I also enjoyed the most. I think I love the structure of it. I love the way they're really thought out. A lot more carefully, I think, than some of the other parts, and enemy placements and surprises around every corner and that kind of stuff. And then stuff like, the Everjails, it's like an optional thing that you just do as a completely different experience, just a one-on-one battle. You know exactly what you're up for. It's a surprise what kind of enemy it is, but you know the kind of thing you're up for. It's pretty straightforward. And what I think I loved in the end is just the richness of the different experiences that you can have within that same game.
Yeah, like one thing that I did not like was, it's not the catacombs. I don't believe it's the catacombs, but without spoiling it, at the start of the game, there's a section you can go through, and there's sort of something that can just kind of one hit kill you.
That's what we were mentioning. He said hero graves.
Yeah.
Oh, they're called hero graves. I didn't know that's what they were called. Sorry.
I think those things are in the hero grave.
I hated those things. And I wish you could get an item that just kills them, right? Because it pissed me off so much.
I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah, no, look, there's ways to deal with them, but
there's ways to deal with it, but not just to get rid of it completely. Like,
wow.
every single time, any single one. I don't think there is a way to get
anyway. I think
I'm not allowed to say anything anyway.
I agree. I think I didn't initially dislike them, but I think that they are frustrating experiences.
They can
be.
It's
just boring.
They weren't fun.
I think that's the thing. It's not fun. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. It's just not fun. Whereas the rest of the game I found so fun and enjoyable and engaging, and then I get up to these bits and I'm like, it's like a grind. Like after a while, I was like, I'm just going to skip those. But that's the benefit of the game, in my opinion. It's just like,
it's optional.
This, like for me, who, I'll skip over lore and story and all this other kind of stuff. The game still gives you so much, and it doesn't screw you over if you miss those things. Like the amount of quests that I just didn't understand and just like stuffed up or like didn't get through, but the game doesn't really punish you too much for it, but it rewards you if you do go through it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like some of the items you get, I think, are really worth doing the quests for. But it's funny because
I totally agree. But I actually appreciate that they allow for both possibilities. It's like they give you an incentive. They give you more if you do more. But in a case like me where I stuffed up some stuff, it's like, okay, you just don't get as much, and that's fair. Like,
still satisfying.
Again, not spoiling it, but there's an area that, Mike and I, when we played at launch, we weren't checking things, we we're playing it blind. So we're just bouncing off each other. And we're like, how do you get to this area? And we're going crazy about it. And in the end, it's related to a quest. And you got it. And I'm like, see, I stuffed this up, so I can't get up there now.
And I only figured out how to get there purely because it's part of the quest.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have figured it
But
out.
I love that. I love, because like the game kind of teases you, like you can get there. And I literally tried for 4 hours, I reckon, like scaling around.
Same. I did it at the start. I was like trying to
go
going around. I'm like, where the F? And I found the area underneath that certain area, and I'm like, it's got to be this way. But it wasn't by the time I cleared everything, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, but I think that emergent
really cool.
kind of gameplay and also the stories in your own mind, like getting back to like the design of the open world, as you said at the start, there's parts that you can skip. So it's not sort of like you have to go, world 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And like, let's be real, it feels like 80% of people skip ahead almost by quote unquote accident. And everyone feels like, wow, I'm the only person in the world that figured this out. I'm a genius. And it's so obvious. It's so like it's structured in a way to incentivize you to do these things. And it's so clever.
It does. And the game even guides you in a certain direction of where to go. But because I think you went in a totally different direction than I did at the start of the game. And you can. And I know, you can go south, east, or northwest kind of direction right off the bat. And the game kind of obviously hints that you're probably in the wrong area because it's a little difficult. But even, certain other areas are pretty balanced even at the start where you go, shit, am I supposed to go this way or this way? Go whichever way you want. It's up to you.
Definitely. All right, well, let's get into gameplay. So, combat, Swinny. Return of the Souls combat?
Yeah, very much. So, for me, look, and this is, a lot of people say this game is like a perfect mix of the previous FromSoft Souls games. Now, obviously, it's not as far into the Sekiro kind of combat as the others, but it at least takes elements of that. And obviously, Bloodborne and the Souls games. But it's definitely closer to Dark Souls 3 to me. It's definitely this in another world could be called Dark Souls 4 and people wouldn't question it simply because it is the closest to those games. Look, all the Souls games have amazing combat. So it's kind of like that. There's not much negative to talk about when it comes to how they've designed it. The only thing that I kind of, and it's not a negative, it's more I've just seen the trend across the Souls games is, so they've got something called Ashes of War in this game, which are basically weapon skills. They were called weapon arts in Dark Souls 3. That's not a spoiler. You and your
hey,
two,
neither were mine too.
To you, a mechanic.
He said talisman, and you said Ashes of War.
These are mechanics. These are mechanics.
It's a little bit of the same.
Nah. So
you could always describe it without saying Ashes of War.
I said. Anyway, you live in your spoiler world. We'll live in the real world. So basically, to me, they've started across the Souls games to get a bit too over the top in regards to the weapon skills. But the thing is, I think that it's more appealing to people. So I think it's the right choice for them to, some of the stuff is like. Pretty early you can get access to stuff that's just crazy in terms of your characters flipping around everywhere. And if you think back to Dark Souls 1, the craziest kind of attacks you could do to enemy, dude, that's distracting. Come on. The craziest attacks you could probably do in Dark Souls 1 was like a spinny attack with one of the
that's true.
attacks.
Yeah.
So it's kind of to see how they've kind of progressed and gotten more away from, not that Dark Souls 1 was too incredibly realistic in its combat, but it was much more grounded, whereas you can just see that they've gone really in this far-fetched direction. But it's not a negative, it's just more an observation, and maybe it's just my personal preference that I kind of think they went a little bit too far, but some of the stuff is amazing that they've included in this. So
this is a super clumsy analogy, but it kind of makes me think like Dark Souls 1 reminds me of something like Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, where it's like, it's super solid, like everyone's plumbed like all the different things you can do. And then, like the series evolved to a point where it's a bit like Marvel versus Capcom 2, where there's just so much extra shit in there. And then for a dummy like me, like I didn't take advantage of everything that I could. Because it's just like, to me, it's almost like too much work. I'm like, oh, whatever. And, you know, as you guys knew, and I won't say what weapon, but I picked up like effectively the strongest weapon theoretically you could get near the start of the game, right? I guess I could say it like that without spoiling it. And then I'm like, all right, I'll use this weapon for the entire game. And I'm still using it in New Game Plus. Like, because it's like, I still haven't been able to respec my character, all this other kind of stuff. So, yeah. But I love the combat in the Souls games. Like Dark Souls 1, to me, that's the biggest defining feature of the series. Like even more so than the actual sort of mechanic of Dark Souls itself, like the trade-offs you have to make with, are you going to try to push forward to get, you know, your souls back, or, you know, go to a bonfire to, you know, make sure that you're effectively using your souls instead of losing them and stuff like that. And just actually touching on that, is that this is kind of the appropriate section on that, right, Swinny? I actually feel that in Dark Souls 1, and maybe it's so much easier because you've got that puzzle box. That's what it feels like, the world. That, you know, the bonfires, where they lay them out, it's like, it's always on the teetering, on the edge. You're like, oh, Jesus, where the hell's a bonfire? Or like, they even have secret ones that you find. And you're like, thank fucking Christ I found this, right? I can now use these souls and like level up, and I need to level up. I don't think this game did that anywhere near as well as Dark Souls.
They were too generous, I would almost say.
Like, I think I would definitely shouldn't say how many there are, but it was like a crazy amount when I saw how many.
You can if you want. I don't think naming it is a spoiler in and of itself.
There's a lot of sites of grace, right, in this game.
AKA bonfires. I still call them bonfires while I play.
Bonfires, but whereas Dark Souls is very limited, and that tension that you have between, I'm dying, I need to go back to get the stuff, it just wasn't there for me. No. It really wasn't. Like a little bit at the start, but then after a while, I don't know, it just never really felt like I lost 150,000 runes. I'm like, oh, well, whatever. Like, I'll just keep going. And I'm like, that's crazy.
That is absolutely one. And look, I don't think it's necessarily a gripe about the game. It's just that part of the reason why Dark Souls was what it was that risk-reward element. And I feel like this game didn't really have it. And there's multiple reasons why. Number one, it was really easy to farm runes, so there was always a fallback. I lost 400,000 or something at one point. I'm like, who gives a shit?
Wow.
They're so easy to farm.
That's a lot.
For a vast majority of the game, that is
No, but towards the end and stuff, it's like whatever. You don't
literally
you actually literally don't care anymore at the end of the game.
Well, if you don't want to level up,
for the vast majority, absolutely, that's quite a lot. But this was towards the end of the game where I didn't care about it as much. Well, one level at whatever level I'm at now is like 600-something thousand. So it's not even a level or something.
But you're right, Mike. Like, can I just elaborate on your point? You're 100% right, because I think it's actually more the farming element. Farming is intentionally so easy in this game, and it's obvious that the developers did it like that. That to me, it actually takes something out of the game.
It did for me.
And I'm actually very mixed on it now. Like I kind of look back and think, I think I would have actually been more frustrated, and it definitely would have made the game less accessible. But I think I would have enjoyed it more if they removed it all. Because if you give me farming,
I'm going to do it.
I'm going to do it. Like,
I have self-control.
I actually didn't do it that much, right? But it did help me out like a little bit in a few spots where I'm like, you know what? Just for self-confidence, I want to grind up a few levels to go, I'm a little bit more powerful, right?
But by the way, it's still, I mean, you know, it's typical Dark Souls. It's still balanced. That even though I can have 50 vitality and I can have 60 dex and 60 this and 60 that, I can still get smashed in 2-3 hits by certain things. So it's actually still balanced in that sense that, yes, it helps you quite a lot.
Yeah.
No doubt about it, but it's not like, oh my god, I'm invincible now and no one can do anything to me. So I think that is probably one thing that pros and cons to it. Another thing is that, and back to the risk and reward thing, is with the shrine, the statues of Marika,
Marika,
the
right?
correct Marika, the correct pronunciation. So it's an element that is in the game. Again, I don't think it's a spoiler. It's a game mechanic that is worth talking about. Basically, they're near certain key parts of the game, and if you die, you have the option of spawning back there as opposed to spawning back at the last site of grace that you're at. And they tend to be near very tough encounters quite often. So there's very few times in the game where I've had to run all the way back to a
Yeah.
boss or worry that I'm gonna lose all my souls, my runes, because you're just gonna respawn there and then you can quickly go grab them again. And look, I appreciate that mechanic, and it's your choice to use it. The problem is, I will use it because it's there, and I almost wish it wasn't in the game. Now, the related to the gameplay, I think, and I've mentioned this when we talked about it on the podcast before. It's related to combat. It's related to Ashes of War, Spirit Summons, etc. Is the game gives you choice. It gives you choice as to whether you want to respawn there or you want to give yourself the hard mode and respawn all the way back. It gives you choice whether you want to farm at what is obviously a farming spot that you can actually reach really early in the game when you think about it. It gives you choice what ashes to use, if you want to use them on just about any weapon, because you can, because they let you do that. Spirit summons, use them if you want, make them OP if you want, or don't. Totally up to you. Now, the reality is most people will probably go, yeah, I will use it because you know what, I want to be powerful and all that. But you don't have to. If you want to actually give yourself that sense of fulfillment and not feel like you're cheating in quotes, then yeah, don't use those things. Don't use the most powerful summon. Don't even use any summons at all. Do it all by yourself. Don't even summon other people and shit. You can totally do that. And I love that choice, I think, ultimately about the game.
Because what did you think about that, Swinny? Just that trade-off that's always been classic in the Souls series.
As in with spirit summons?
No, the tension of losing rune souls versus like going back and grabbing them, spending them, all that kind of stuff.
I mean, it's different in different parts of the game, right? So the open world, it's very easy to recover anything because you literally just run past and grab it on a horse. There's no tension at all there. And as you said, especially in the open world, the sites of grace or bonfire equivalent are they're everywhere. So basically, you're never going to be too far away from where they are. And I also agree that in the legacy dungeons that they didn't. There's only a few that I'm like, oh, that side of grace was a little tucked away, but the rest were pretty clear on you. If you explore a little bit, you're gonna find all the sites of grace in those areas,
And plenty of them.
Yeah, so that is an element that I definitely miss from the older games. If I think back to Dark Souls 1, if you think back to Sen's Fortress, the bonfire after you get through the massive thing of Sen's Fortress is hidden at the top. It's wild. It's like almost like anti-game design.
Assholes,
but
I love it.
But it's so memorable. You know what I mean? It's so memorable. There's nothing like that in this game at all. Like
that's where I'm kind of almost coming from. That some of my most memorable experiences in Dark Souls 1 was like desperately trying to go, where the hell can I go? Like, I'm like gonna die here, right?
Yeah.
Whereas and I'm not a very good gamer, so it's not anything to do with that. It's like I just didn't get that sense very much in this game. It kind of felt a bit disposable. Like I'd lose a lot of souls. Like even with the bosses, I'd just go in and lose all the souls first go because I'm like, whatever. Like
there were times where I didn't even bother picking them up. I'm like, it's good. It takes too long.
Dark Souls 1, man, I'm going back for those souls. I need those souls, dude. And it's quite funny to think that was almost one of the defining characteristics of Dark Souls. And to me, it really is lost in this game to a large degree. But do you want to get onto the character building, Swinny?
Yeah, just look, we don't need to spend too long on this because we can talk a bit more about the characters we built in the spoiler section. We're going to cover that at the start. But what I wanted to mention about that was just the sheer amount of build options there are in this game.
Again, choice.
It's probably, out of the previous games, a lot of the fans thought that Dark Souls 2 was probably the best in that regard in terms of viable builds. This floors everything, just in terms of just the crazy stuff you can do. And it's not like they've added a new attribute, but basically it's pretty similar in terms of the design of how you build your characters. It's just that there's so much more out there. There's so many more weapons, so many more like Ashes of War and weapon skills, and they've had so many new spells and what they call incantations in this game that it's just kind of wild. And just you've seen, like, I've watched quite a bit of people on YouTube in the Souls community, and there's people that focus on making PvP compilations, and it's just they're going to have content for years from this game. It's kind of wild, the fun builds you can do. So big congrats to FromSoftware for nailing that, because I think that's what really is the longevity of the PvP scene, is having variety. So it's really good.
Even for PvE though, I love the variety in it, because I mostly played as, some builds, but I tried heaps of different weapons. I mean, I don't know how many off the top of my head, but I experimented with a ton of different ones and farmed materials to be able to upgrade them, to make them viable, just to test them out and play with them. And that's what I enjoyed about this game, that I don't really feel I did that as much in the previous games. I tended to stick to one or two things, and that was it. Whereas with this, I'm like, yeah, I'll try this thing. This thing seems cool. I'll upgrade it and I'll play with it for a while, and it's cool in certain circumstances, but it's probably shit in others. But I just loved experimenting and trying stuff out and mixing and matching and trying a certain weapon with a different Ash of War. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the fact that I don't play PvP at all, but even in PvE, it's really fun to just experiment and try different things out. So
No, I totally agree.
it was really cool.
Because, like, for me, it sounds so dumb what I'm about to say, but with Dark Souls 1, I didn't even kind of know there are builds, really. Because it's like, I was just basically doing, I guess, quality build, right? Like, going through it, which I think is, like, the most basic, but also the most obvious, and probably just one of the better ones to just do, right?
It's actually not obvious. The first 3 or 4 playthroughs, I did not even think about doing quality. So yeah, that's interesting.
But what I mean is, like, if you look at the surface area of all the builds, it's sort of like, there's just some that are just like pretty clear, like that's probably the best direction to go. Whereas with this, I look at it and I'm like, oh, I want to go back. I want maybe even play the game from scratch as more like mage or something like that. Whereas I just wouldn't think of doing that with Dark Souls 1, like at all, right? Like, whereas this, I feel like, in a, kind of classic fighting game terminology, they're just trying to buff like all the things that are weak, and then like do as minimal amount of nerfs on the stuff that are maybe a bit too overpowered. Because even some of the stuff they've nerfed from like 1.0 to now,
I agreed with
1.0, 4.1, I think it is up to now, but they've nerfed stuff, but it's still like some of the best summons, some of the best weapons, even though they've nerfed them.
Some of the best
Ashes of War,
as
exactly,
well. Yeah.
exactly. And I think it's ultimately intentional, but they just don't want to make it so super OP that it just dominates everything. So, yeah. And do you want to cover any of these other mechanics, Sweeney?
Yeah.
The only thing I'll mention is, we talked about the Ashes of War. They give you so many in this game, but I feel I still feel the system's a little undercooked. And I think part of that, first I was saying obviously some of them are over top. I was saying that earlier, but I didn't use so many of them. And I'm thinking, I just wish there was a way, maybe some weapon types could have two, like a primary and a secondary.
Yeah.
Because there was no point, like the weapons that I was using, which I'll talk about later, it just made no sense to use anything else other than those unique weapon skills that they had. So I'm looking at all these Ashes of War thinking, man, some of these seem cool, and sure I could go and try it, but I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. So, like, and I'm already spent 180 hours in this bloody game. So I feel that they can still really innovate on top of what they've done here. And it's only the second game that they've really gone all out on it. But I think there's more that they can do. So.
Okay.
Well, without spoiling it, like some of the weapons, you just can't use the Ashes of War, right?
Correct, yeah.
So I found myself into that spot. So I couldn't use the Ashes of War. So, and because I committed to this stupid idea of, I'm going to take this weapon from the first bit of the game to beat the last boss, which, in the spoiler section, we'll cover why that was a little bit frustrating. But yeah, I never got to use them because of that. And
why not though? What do you mean?
Because you can't remove it from certain weapons.
Yeah, but I mean, you can use it on that particular weapon if you upgrade that weapon, obviously.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. Is that wrong, Swinny? I think some weapons,
can't remove it,
legendary
but-
weapons, you can't use Ashes of War on them.
Yeah, Ashes War.
But they have their
generally-
own. Well, sorry, that's right. But they have their own
I could
ability
only
that's
use one
basically
in
an
a
Ash
game
of
that
War
has, like,
just for that
hundreds,
ability.
you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I couldn't try them. Like, and I agree with where Swinny's coming from. It'd be good if it's like you could put it in the secondary spot and it's
Yep.
like weaker or something like that.
Yeah,
Like that would be
yeah.
useful for me because I'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, cool, I'll try some of these other ones. But because I just couldn't, and because I had this commitment to this, and a lot of the weapons, to be fair, like that are useful, you can't do this. You can't replace the Ashes of War because they've already got really good ones.
Yeah, but you tend to, so all the unique weapons that have a particularly unique ability, I'm going to call it an Ash of War just for that weapon that's unique. You can find an equivalent similar weapon that you can attach a different Ash of War to. And I did always play with multiple weapons on me. So there were a couple of weapons that I'll talk about later, so it's not a spoilery, that had unique abilities on them.
I think, but the point I was trying to make is that I want to use that ability, but
On
I
a
want
different-
I would like to be able to try other ones
Yeah.
on that same weapon, possibly.
Yeah, same.
Like
Yeah,
as
yeah,
a
so that you
secondary
can't, yeah.
ability.
But what I'm saying is, and I agree that would be really cool. But I'm saying, for example, there was a katana that I would use with a specific Ash of War that was just for that katana, but then I had a different katana that I applied whatever the hell Ash of War I wanted. And honestly, sometimes I got confused. I'm like, shit, which one do I actually have equipped? And until I used the Ash of War, I didn't know because they felt exactly the same to me. Same move set, looked similar enough that I almost got them confused. So my workaround for that was I would just swap to a similar weapon that I could apply whatever I wanted to. One thing that I really, really liked that was kind of clever as well is you can... it took me a little bit to figure out that you can put a no skill weapon Ashes of War on a shield. Is that a spoiler? That's maybe a spoiler.
I'm laughing because I could see into God's face, and I'm like, I knew he was like lining that up.
Well,
as
I feel like
watching his face.
it's a minor thing that
No, but that's a discovery thing, right? Because like I was the same
Yeah,
as you.
okay,
When I
maybe it's a
figured it
discovery
out, I'm
thing,
like,
sorry. That's probably
that's so
spolier.
useful.
It was
That's
really
so
useful. It was really cool. So
Yeah.
like again, it's about mixing and trying these different things out. And I actually experimented with a bunch of different Ashes of War across multiple weapons. I played around with I wouldn't say all of them, but I reckon I played around with a good 50% of the Ashes of War.
There's a good section where we talk about our favorite weapons and our
Yeah,
builds.
we'll
So
talk
in our
about
spoiler
that.
section.
Can
So-
I bring up what I think is awesome for me, who doesn't like to play these games online, which is the spirit summons.
Yep.
I love the spirit
Yeah.
summon systems because I don't like playing it online. I don't play co-op. I don't play PvP. I don't play like PvE co-op or anything like that, right? But the spirit summons to me is almost like effectively a little bit of that
It is.
flavor to it.
It is. Totally, yeah.
And it totally makes the game easier. But again, it's
Definitely.
options, and I love that. And I do feel like some of the bosses, it's totally in like they built them around the spirit summons as well.
There's a point we're going to talk about regarding that. So
You mean with a certain boss, or
no, just bosses. Like we'll get to there talking about spirit summons and bosses. So.
yeah.
But I agree, definitely makes life easier.
But I found that to me was because it's like completely brand new to the Soul series, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean they've had some elements before, but nothing on this level.
No, you could summon individual NPCs, but that's kind of it, really.
Yeah.
Comparable to this.
Yeah, I loved it. Like, honestly, it was one of my favorite parts of the game. There were certain summons that I had that were just my tanks. It's like, okay, you got to tank it up for me. I'm gonna start attacking from behind, you take the aggro away from me. And,
What about
and you're going.
No, I was gonna say, what about you? Finish your point. I was gonna ask about crafting.
Oh, that's
how
what
much
I
you
wanted to
guys-
get to. Yeah,
Yeah. What about crafting?
which I like literally used like 0 times in the game.
Whereas I use
Same.
all the time.
Yeah, you said that. I remember when I went to your
for-
place.
For crafting arrows, for crafting throwing knives, for crafting buff items, for
Wow.
crafting healing
I'm
items.
somewhere in
all the
between, but
time.
I'm more towards Intergod. I used
Yeah.
it for healing and getting rid of poison and the old minor things like that.
Some of the best items in the game are in that crafting menu. That, and some of them you'll get a few out in the world, but there's a reason why people there's a whole meme out there about a certain item that people are like, oh, that looks like a rare item, and then they get it, and then everyone's disappointed that it's a certain item.
Yep.
That's because people haven't even looked in the crafting menu to see what you can use with it. It makes
certain
some of the
leaf?
it makes some of the I'm trying not to say it. It makes some of
think
the
I know what
best
you're talking
items in the game, and it's limited. So it's like it's. But I completely understand why people wouldn't use it. It is it's really veering close to almost like your standard open world game design, and
Yeah,
it's very
like potions in Skyrim or in.
Yeah,
I've never used them. Same as
it's-
in The Witcher.
but it's very non-FromSoft like, and it's. But the thing is that what I found it was super useful was for those reasons that I'm like, well, I'm picking all this stuff, I better use it, and not only that, but I'm using bows all the time, and this is a really good way to just replenish stuff because you can only hold a certain amount on your person at a time. I can just bump that up whenever I need it as in an emergency. So, or like when I need them. So.
What I found a bit annoying about crafting is there were a few items that I wanted to craft, but you had to farm
Yeah.
the ingredients. There was no way to buy them anywhere. Whereas other things you could kind of buy some stuff and you could do that. And one of them was the lucky foot, I'll call it, which increased your well, it wasn't the lucky. Well, it's not called that, but there's a certain item that increases the
I know what you're
number
talking about,
of runes you get. And the only way to get that is by farming certain things.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I wish I could just buy it so I don't have to waste my time waiting for chance to give me that shit because it's a waste of time. But anyway, the one thing to move on for the crafting thing is
can I just say like the
Yeah.
final bit, because to me it's like I'm a business person, so I'll just go buy my items, the poison, all that kind of stuff. There's so many sites of grace everywhere. I'll just like get my health back. I think that's the thing. Like runes don't feel expensive in this game, so I just go, oh yeah, I'll buy 99 arrows. Yeah, whatever. I don't really care. It's like more efficient to be like the communist, like Swinny.
that's what I do as well. Yeah.
No, what I'm talking about is you can only hold 99. So there's times when I'm nowhere near a site of grace and I've used all 99.
Oh yeah, I'm
and
just
need
not.
more.
You gotta build
Yeah, I'm
another
not
mana,
using
yeah.
99 like
Yeah.
you, like shooting the bosses and stuff like that.
I just like I like I'll talk a bit about my build later, but I
Yeah.
used a lot of arrows. Let's just say. So.
Was there anything else on gameplay you wanted to cover, Mike?
I think. Oh, okay. I
No,
was
just
gonna
the flask of wondrous physics, which I personally didn't use all that much. I
Oh,
used
really?
it. I used it sort of per encounter,
Wow.
per major encounter.
Oh, so yeah,
but
you used it all the time
yeah.
then?
Well, no, because at a certain point, because I was experimenting and trying different mixes and stuff, I ended up kind of not using it anymore. And then I'm like, oh shit, I have this thing, which is another way of making your life a little bit easier in certain circumstances. Another quick thing is obviously you get a map, so markers, little aids like that. I think are quite useful. So there's little there's two things that you have. One which is normal markers, and I think you get up to 100 of them or something. And there's different types of markers, like different little icons you can place just to remind yourself where things are. They did patch NPC locations in a more recent patch. So
Yeah.
initially when the game came out, you had to kind of put a little marker for yourself to try to remember where someone was. Whereas now they actually do appear in the map as long as you've seen them in that playthrough. And what I actually really liked, for some reason, just the concept behind it, is when you put the actual markers for a location, like the little pins. It's this big streak of blue light in the sky, but when you get to it, it disappears, like it fades away when you're next to it. And there's something about that which is kind of cool. It's like a little touch where you don't have to go to your map and get rid of it. It just fades away.
Must have learned that from Assassin's Creed, hey?
That was from Breath of the
Played
Wild.
it, I would have.
No, the disappearing one as well from Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, I think the Assassin's Creed copy from Breath of the Wild. But let's move on.
Totally.
Let's move on. Let's go to the topic that everyone's been waiting for: difficulty. Who wants to tackle this first?
Let me just say up front. So this is my overall thoughts on difficulty.
Yeah, go on.
I
You've got
have
the
a bit more
floor.
I have a bit more to say about bosses, which we'll get into after this. That's why it's kind of like flows into it. For me, and not everyone's definitely going to feel this way, if you take full advantage of all the new mechanics they've given you, this is the easiest Souls game. If you limit yourself and don't take advantage of them, there's many parts of this game where it is the hardest. So this links. That's why I kind of
the hardest.
I stopped you.
It's the
I stopped.
hardest.
that's why I stopped you talking about bosses and spirit summons, because when we get into bosses in a second, we'll talk a bit about how they've balanced things there. But overall difficulty, not talking about bosses. I think this game is easily the most accessible. There's definitely some spikes. There's definitely areas you go to where some of the enemies are way more difficult than you'd probably expect, given the proximity to like the starting area of the game. But overall, they had such a huge task ahead of them to balance difficulty of this game, and I think they did really well.
Can I have my opening monologue and then I'll go to Mike's opening monologue? My opening monologue is, anyone who says it's not a hard game, fuck off. It's a hard game. But it's not an NES hard game where you can like try to beat Battletoads and play it every day for a year, and some people will just never beat it. Same as Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. But I feel like this game, if you are dedicated and you want to beat it, I genuinely feel 95% of people can beat it. If they put themselves like, and that might be a lot longer. Like I'd probably take longer to beat this game than you guys. But if you dedicate yourself, you can do it. And if you get stuck, you can go to YouTube and get help. But like NES hard games, it's just skill. It's like you have to be good and quick and twitchy. And I don't think it's as extreme as that. But again, anyone who says it's not a hard game, fuck off. I hate when people say this shit. Like, oh, it's not a hard game, it's so easy and all this shit. It's like, no, it's a hard game. It's not impossible, but it's not NES hard. That's my perspective. How about you, Mike?
No, I agree. It's definitely a hard game. It's a hard game made easier through the mechanics that are on offer, but it still doesn't necessarily, it doesn't make it an easy game by any means. It just makes it an easier game than what the standard sort of experience is. But yeah, there were moments where it was almost harder with certain bosses and stuff than in almost any game, other than maybe Sekiro, where you really had to learn the combat. There were also moments where you could kind of brute force your way through a bunch of things, which is interesting. So if I was to compare this game to something like Sekiro, the combat and the satisfaction in Sekiro was much higher for me, because it was very refined. The one-on-one battles, you had to really learn to do it properly.
The dance.
We had to learn the dance. You really did. And that combat was just phenomenal, because I still remember to this day, there was a certain boss fight in Sekiro where I was trying and I kept failing. And there was no way to switch the difficulty, no way to really upgrade more or cheese it or whatever.
There's no spirit summons.
There was no spirit summons.
No
Nothing.
shooting arrows from a tree.
You had to learn it. You had to learn how to bloody deal with that particular boss and the movesets and everything.
That's what scares me about the Sekiro, by the way.
Yes, but it was so satisfying when you did that, that not even, Dark Souls 1 or anything like that ever felt as satisfying as that. Whereas with a game like this, I have to admit that there was... It's not that it was easier or easy or anything like that. It wasn't as satisfying, because you could brute force a lot of shit, or you could go and use a summon to distract the boss and then kind of just go in, chip away, come back, chip away. It just made things a little too trivial in some parts that I felt I wish I had the self-control to not use summons and to not do things that felt a bit cheesy.
Well,
but I could help myself in some parts.
Before we get too much into the next section, like I want to touch on some of those things. Like, but going back to the game's difficulty, just in terms of the spikes versus, how it progressed, because it's very challenging, right? Like in an open world game versus Dark Souls 1, which is my reference point, which they know where you're up to. They have some clear roadblocks that they want you to like have to push through. Whereas this, you can tackle things in different orders. Just me personally, like I felt like it, like I'd heard, not like in explicit detail, but I'd heard there's some spikes in this game, but I don't really feel like that. I just felt like late game, if you weren't set up right, you'd get fucked over pretty quickly, right? And that was where I learned, man, you need to amp up vigor like crazy, like in this game compared to like Dark Souls. So I didn't have very much vigor for a while. I'm like getting stomped on. And I felt like, when I rebalanced that was probably the best, thing to level it out a bit. But how about you, Swinny?
Yeah, I talked about this on the main show. That I had a lot of issues mid game. Like I was breezing through the game, and then I hit a wall because I wasn't leveling vigor. Now, it wasn't because obviously I know how important HP is, but I'm an experienced Dark Souls 1 player in the sense that that's a game where you don't really need to level vigor
No.
much at all.
Yeah.
And that I learned quickly at that point that the games are just different. They're
Yeah.
just different. It's not that it's worse because of it. I wish I'd kind of thought that ahead of that, but obviously, like, I was blind to the game at that point. I didn't know how long the game was really going to be, and I didn't know that, like, there's some enemies that will literally, if you don't level vigor up a bunch, will literally one shot you. Normal enemies, normal attacks as you get further into the game, and at that point, it's like, clearly, I'm meant to be higher in this regard. Now, there's people who can obviously do soul level 1 runs or whatever. Like, I'm not talking challenge runners and people with experience. I'm talking the average player. If they don't level vigor, they will have a tough time. And it did make me a bit miserable because I had to essentially spend the next 20 levels of my character leveling that up.
yeah, that's
And
fair, yeah.
whereas, and I'm like thinking, man, I wish I could level, this stat and this
I
stat
want this
because
weapon. Yeah.
because that's what my character was. But no, I'm like, well, clearly this game is not Dark Souls 1. So I think for a lot of people probably have a rude awakening like I did with that.
Could I use that as a segue into the next section?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I wanted to loop back to Mike's point. 'Cause, like, I definitely approached this like Dark Souls 1. So like with the bosses, I was much more like balanced, offense, defense. And I remember, Mike and I were playing a blind when it launched, and he was just like, "Oh, you got to be more aggressive." So like, and with Dark Souls, you guys said when I first played it, because you played it like 10 years ago, and I played it fresh only a couple of years ago. I'm like, okay, try to get in there and whack the shit and just like, spam attack, and I just get destroyed. I'm like, shit, right? But honestly, with this game, there's times where I was just like, I won, and just win. And I'm like, this is not like a Souls game, and it felt wrong.
There's times when I completely forgot there was a stamina bar. It's
Yeah.
kind of like that's exactly.
I over
kind
level
of the same.
stamina for sure. Like, I look at my character, I want to respec it. I'm like, I'm gonna knock off stamina. Like, I don't get into many situations where I'm like, oh shit, I'm low on stamina. Like I need other stats to be boosted more than that, like mind and stuff like that. So I think it's a massive loss, like for me, like in terms of that balance of combat. Like it feels more aggressive, but then I don't know, just maybe I'm just so shit at the game, but it became just like a punching match. It's like they're attacking me, I'm attacking them. I'm like, well,
It's
I feel
more
like I'm gonna.
Bloodborne-y.
No,
It def-
yeah.
Bloodborne felt. I mean, Bloodborne. That
Swinny's
was
the
the thing
expert on
about
Bloodborne here, but
yeah.
I think that's a bit more like it's enticing you to attack
Yeah.
to then get more of your health back, right? Isn't that right, Swinny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
which is not like this game.
It's not the same, no. But it's definitely more towards being geared towards being more aggressive than some of the other Dark Souls titles.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I definitely felt like that. Yeah.
You have to kind of be more aggressive. Yeah.
Well, I cut you off before, so maybe let's bring it back to the Spirit Summons bosses. This is what I was really alluding to with the mechanics, and the fact that Spirit Summons, obviously there's some key ones that anyone that has looked anything up about Elden Ring on the internet probably knows by now, but I didn't say it.
No, just
But the unfortunate part is that when it comes to the balancing, there are many bosses that do seem to be balanced with Spirit Summons in mind.
100%.
100%. And for anyone that decides to not use them for whatever reason, is going to learn very quickly that some of these bosses, especially late game, are so punishing that they do border on completely unfair if you don't use those mechanics. And I don't know how I feel about that. There is part of me that does want to go through the game without summons, but I'm kind of dreading certain things because I'm like, they've designed around it, which I think is great because I think it's a fantastic crux that players that are struggling can lean on. But unfortunately, and I've watched some really good dissections about this, it is kind of almost at a detriment to the boss design to me in terms of their mechanics. overall, I love the looks of the bosses and everything like that. Like, I
Oh,
love the
yeah.
bosses.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
when it
yeah.
comes to some of them with mechanically, I just feel that I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I like them as much as some of the older games in that regard, simply because they're balanced around those summons.
Feels like
Yeah.
we're shitting on the game a lot, to
No,
be
no,
honest.
I don't, well,
Being brutal about
that's a
it.
fair, brutal assessment, and I think
It's all
that is what
accurate.
it
It's all
is.
true.
The fact that I played a lot of the original Dark Souls without summoning anyone else, and having to actually then learn the boss. There were
Yeah,
so many
yeah.
times when I remember going, fuck, I gotta learn this moveset. Oh, and then he's gonna do this, and
Yeah.
this is gonna happen next, and oh shit, I gotta counteract that. And there were times when you're like, how the fuck are you supposed to actually even be able to counteract this? And then you learn how to counteract, and you're like, oh, duh, of course. Whereas with this, I don't even know if I remember half the move sets that they have, because I just don't give a shit. Because either my summons is going to distract them and I can just go in and do whatever, or I just keep brute forcing their attacks. But one thing that I think, and it's sort of applicable to this topic and the previous topic, is spamming R1. Yes, you can do that, but there is an incentive to not do that, which is to break their poise, you have to use the heavy attacks. They do heaps more poise damage.
So I spam my weapon art. That's what I do.
So you can just spam your weapon out, which kind of breaks that too, yeah. But I mean, like, it's not, you get rewarded for doing something different, or not constantly only using R1. And that was awesome, actually, because I found myself, especially with the first main boss in the game, that it really, I was just using R1, and I'm like, man, this guy he keeps just whacking me, and there's no way to just relax in this fight. And then I realized, oh, if I use heavy attacks, okay, I see, that's a bit better. And so there's things like that. But unfortunately, I did find that, bar a few bosses, it didn't have that same feel of needing to learn.
No.
And not all the way to Sekiro, where you had to really learn their moves, but even some of the other Souls games. So, and I feel like that's it is a bit of a detriment, I think, to this kind of game, and it makes it a bit of a shame, because there's all these awesome bosses, and I don't even remember most of their movesets now.
And one of the most controversial parts of the game, it seems, after people have really played through it, is the repeating bosses, or like mini bosses, whatever you want to call them. I think, to be fair, like, I just have not played enough of the optional content of the game to be frustrated. But as you guys have both, finished the game, clocked it completely, did you guys feel at some point it was like, fuck, like, this is the 12th time I've seen this guy? Or
Not the top. No, I didn't think it was, the 12th time or something, but I definitely noticed there was a repetition in certain bosses, to the extent that some bosses I wouldn't be able to recall their names, because was it the something worm, or was it the something else worm? Was the one located here? Or was it the one located over there? Like, what was the difference? I don't remember. However, again, unless you're a completionist and you go everywhere, you're not going to have that experience. I think the most bosses you meet through the normal playthrough are quite distinct to a large extent.
There are repeats, and I think a lot of people have issues with the fact that some of, let's talk the critical path bosses, depending on which kind of, because you can kind of veer off that critical path a little bit, but there are times when things are repeated in a way that kind of almost undermines what would have been a unique experience otherwise. I actually don't mind as much.
Okay.
I'm of the opinion that the bosses are cool enough that I'm happy to fight them again.
Yeah.
But I completely understand why people, specifically for those bosses that, you think are like, okay, this person has lore behind them or whatever. There's no reason why am I fighting that person again in like this optional thing, But there's no escaping having to reuse some form of content, and I think in this size of game, and I think they did it pretty well. I just think that maybe they went a little bit too far for some people in that regard.
Yeah,
but
I
it's not
agree.
personally an issue for me. So.
Yeah, I didn't find an issue either, but I agree. For some, I can see how it can be distracting for some people. And there's different types of repeating enemies, if you could say that. There's certain, like the death bird. I don't even know what they're called. The weird looking baby death birds.
Oh, yeah.
that there's multiples of, and I think they only appear at night, and same as the night cavalry. Yeah,
You
look,
deserve that
maybe
one.
it's a mini spoiler. Yeah,
You deserve
but
that
I'm not.
one.
It doesn't really. You don't know what the enemies are or anything like that. But
Oh, no,
the
the
night
Trying
It's a
so
cavalry.
crab, it's a
hard.
crab.
I'm trying
That's
so
really
hard not to
hard.
name. I'm trying so hard not to name.
Yeah, so there's certain bosses that do repeat, and their movesets are the same, and still didn't mind them because I knew that there'll be a nice little reward at the end of each one.
Well,
But
do you think it's a good time to move? Because, the repeating is related
Yeah.
to the size of the game.
Yep.
Look, like, opening statement from me, like, this game, it's an interesting one. I think it's too long. I think it's too long. I still think it's an awesome game. I'd still give it a 10 out of 10. Super strongly recommend the game. I just think if they edit, like, it sounds horrible, but I feel like just if they edited out 20% of the content, to me, wouldn't take anything away from the game. If anything, it would be like, holy fuck, like, this is just firing on all cylinders. Like, whoa, how crazy good is this game? I don't think one person would say, oh, there just wasn't enough in the game if they cut 20%, like the worst 20% of the game. Who's going to say it's like not enough? But I reckon you can't mount an argument if you cut the worst 20% of the game out. It just wouldn't elevate the game even further. But that's kind of my opening stance on it. But I only played like the main campaign. So, the 70, 80 hours that I played. You guys
Which is
played
still a lot for
everything.
a main
Well, it's a lot
game,
for me because I don't have
right?
much time to game.
But for a lot of games, that's a lot. 70 hours is, I think, a lot for just
Yeah.
the main campaign. I think even The Witcher, how many hours would you say The Witcher is when you just
Oh,
do
that's
the
pretty
main,
long. That's like 100, isn't
main
it?
campaign? Is it 100?
Sounds about right.
Well, in the higher length.
Yeah, I think Witch is probably one of the worst examples.
Actually, that's probably the worst example. Yeah. Okay. Most games do not take 70 hours to complete.
Yeah, like God of War's
Nowhere
20
near.
hours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That tends to be the case. I do wonder though, does it really take that long if you don't go, if you stick to the beaten path and you actually just do what the game guides you to
Yeah,
be doing?
but that's
because
like-
you can complete it just by doing that.
Yeah, but
right?
that's like going, I can complete Super Metroid in 40 minutes if I know what I'm doing. It's like, yeah, like that's not how it works though.
Most people won't do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll get distracted and they move on to things and they check stuff out.
And some of the best content in this game is in those optional areas as
agree
well.
with that.
So I agree. I think that 20% is a good kind of figure for what I have in my head. Like when I think the first week I spoke about this game on the show, I did kind of mention that I didn't know how I felt about, there's a swamp in Dark Souls 3. Does this swamp in Elden Ring need to be 30 times the size of that?
There's a swamp in Elden Ring. That's a spoiler.
Okay, I'll take that one.
Oh!
I'll take that one to get my point across. But basically,
To get your point across, good one.
the
Give him a
There
point
are-
across.
there's times when I'm like, this area didn't need to be this big. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful to to explore, especially on horseback and ride through it. But if you want to look at everything, then that's just adding extra time to it. And obviously you don't have to, but the game begs to be explored.
Yeah.
The player shouldn't feel like it's their fault that there's something that needs to be explored. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that 20% is a really good number. I think there's certain areas in the game, especially later in the game, that definitely could have been cut in size and nobody would have complained.
And look, like I've just started going back to the game. So I'm going through the Fighting Cowboy guide to just do everything, which is like a complete opposite way that I played it, which was completely blind and stuffed things up and progressed too far in the game. I'm like, I can't go back now. Damn it. But I'm loving going back to it. I have to admit. Like it. What?
Sorry, I was trying to steal the spoiler number away from it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm loving going back. So I'm looking forward to doing all that optional stuff that I missed out. But yeah, again, like I still feel like there's a little bit too much, like just extra stuff, extra fluff.
There-
But not
there
too much
is-
more. Too much extra.
I'm surprised I actually finished this game in some ways, if that makes sense. Because any game like I still haven't finished The Witcher because of stuff like this. Because there's so much stuff on the side that I just end up, life gets in the way and I stop playing. Then I start again, a year later or something, get to the same point, progress a bit further, stop again. Because there's too much. I put too many hours, and I can't just focus on the main campaign. And I was worried that this game would overstay its welcome. I really was. And it did get to a certain point where I felt, man, maybe this it's starting to feel like a little bit of a chore. Because I am going and trying to explore literally everything there is to explore, and I feel like I really did literally explore everything that I did. And I ended up looking at the wiki right before I finished the actual game, just to tick things off and whatnot. And there were very few things that I actually missed, and I went, shit, okay, that explains why I'm feeling like the game is just a little too long now.
Explains where those 160
And explains
hours
where the
went.
160 hours actually went. Exactly, yeah. On a single playthrough, no less. Because New Game Plus was very short so far.
I think that's a really cool way to put it, though, because even though I'm adamant that you could cut 20%, and I really wish that there was an editor who was just like, bang, I'm going to cut 20% of this and make this like the best game ever. Which, I think, cut 20% of this game, the right 20%, Jesus, that's... I wouldn't want to try to argue against it being one of the best games ever, because it already is almost at that level to me. But with that phrase that you said, even though I do feel like there was too much and went too long, it never felt like it overstayed its welcome. Like, I got through it 70, 80 hours, whatever it was, really loved it. And I'm like, damn, I'm going to come back to this.
Because it's probably a good time. That's a good amount of time to spend into it. But if you think about the hours that Swinny and I spent, double that. Then you get into the territory of that is too much.
Well, no, but like, even with the extra, it's sort of a bit like, it's like a TV show, like a 20 episode season. There's like 2 or 3 episodes you go, well, it would be great if they just cut those episodes because they're shit. But you're not going to say the whole season's crap. Like, it could be 10 out of 10 seasons.
Well,
so
we've had a whole run of like talking shit about this game. I think we should probably talk some nice stuff about
well, no, but we all like it, right?
Yeah.
But...
We love the game. we said multiple times 10 out of 10 game. I love the game. We're nitpicking so much.
I'd totally say this is a 10 out of 10 game.
I was trying to segue into the next section, right?
Well, no, but I feel like this is shitting on the game again, because to
so
me...
the graphics are pretty average.
I feel like you're trying to go, let's talk about good things, but I feel like this is actually the one criticism of the game I think is so valid, that the PC version, for a lot of people, not with shitty builds and stuff like that, still like can't run the game well. Like,
so we're jumping straight into performance. I thought we were going to graphics first, but that's fine. That's all good.
Well,
that's what I was trying. That's why I wasn't talking. Definitely not talking positive things about the PC version. That's for sure.
Yeah, but even the PS5 version, like the fact that I had to go back and forth and go, am I going to play the PS4 version on backwards compatibility versus the PS5 version? And I went back and forth. And then I started playing
just play the goddamn game.
And then I'm like, oh shit, okay, I want to play the PS4 version. I'm like, oh, I can't because I'm already too far progressed. I'm like, that's just annoying. I don't need that annoyance.
I feel so bad for PC players of this game.
Oh,
After I beat the game, I could finally go watch, because I watch lots of Let's Players
Yeah.
and things like that, and content creators in the Soul scene. I was finally able to watch them, and they're all playing on PC. And by God, the stuttering is just so bad for people that are running on high-end machines, and it's all happening in the same spots.
Yep.
There's even cutscenes with the bosses that is in real time, and everyone, like, there's even a reaction video that I could link to you guys at some point that shows it stutter in the exact same spot for everyone reacting. It's such a shame that, and it's still happening for a lot of people. It's honestly... Yeah, like, I think that's the biggest criticism I probably have of this game, is the fact that the PC version launched so in
it's still though
state.
No, but this is the thing, it's still like this. It's unacceptable, and it's really bad that you can genuinely say from a frame rate performance perspective it's better to run it on a Steam Deck, because Valve manually have patched the game to rewrite the calls that they're making. That's the fundamental problem. It's like the way they're using DirectX 12 is wrong, and they're not caching it. They know how to do it on the consoles, but they're not doing it right on PC. So there's no reason why the game should stutter, but because of the way they've made it, it does, because they haven't built it properly. And it, like, honestly, it's pretty much just like unacceptable. If I bought this on PC, I'd be freaking livid, man.
On top of being hacked if you play multiplayer.
I'd be kind of like, I'm kind of shocked that the game hasn't got more hate, because like just the constant stutter throughout the game would just fucking piss me off so much. I didn't experience that. I just had dips and slow down and all that stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, even on PS5, that is a pretty bloody powerful console.
Oh,
It does drop frames quite frequently. But you know why that is? It's because it's an amazing looking game. So let's
Yes,
talk
it
about the
is.
graphics. It is a really pretty looking game in many sections, and there's very cool, diverse parts of the world that, from an aesthetic perspective, are also quite different. Parts that are very sort of red in their feel, parts that are blue in their feel, yellow. It's a very mixed sort of. I won't mention the kind of area specifically, but I think from an aesthetics perspective, it's a very cool mixed experience. And there were, a few times where I stopped, and I don't think it's a really weird one. I don't think Dark Souls games were traditionally necessarily the best looking games. Far from it in some ways, but they were good. They were good. They weren't great. They weren't like some other games where I'm like, holy shit, like this. The graphics in this particular spot are just mind-blowingly amazing, but there were really pretty parts of the game, really pretty parts in a lot of different sections. And there were quite a few parts in this game that I would stop and just look at the scenery and even make my character sit down while doing it, to almost role play, looking at the pretty scenery, which is a bit nerdy, but whatever. And yeah, I think graphically it's a beautiful looking game.
Yeah, I think the trend really started with Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, where they really started to emphasize their strong points in the art design and create beautiful vistas. Even they're like looking to the distance, okay, and because that's, if you look up close to the graphics in Elden Ring, it's nothing special, but it's the whole package of what they do with the tone and the colors, and just. I mentioned this on the show as well, but I'll say it again here. It's like looking at concept art when you look out to the horizon every time, which is wild. And it's the setting helps that they're able to, do crazy stuff like that. But it's a beautiful looking game. I'm just floored every time I look at those, running along the cliffs and looking out on the horizon. So.
And I do. Sorry, just a quick one. Speaking about the horizon, unlike previous games, it is really cool because if you see something in the horizon, you can probably get to it in this game. It's not just there for the sake of a prop. And if you see like a castle or something on a cliff, you're like, man, I'm going to be able to explore that castle on a cliff. And you do get to explore that castle on a cliff. And I think that's a really cool experience.
I was just going to say, because it reminds me a little bit like Nintendo, where it's more about the art style and the consistency of the art style and the execution of the art style, that, people were like, oh, back in the day, oh, this, console does HD, 1080p or whatever. But like the art style's shit, right? And I'd still prefer like looking at Yoshi's Island, which is like 24p. And I would argue to like my death that looks better than so many of these other games that people are pointing out, right? And I think for me, it's like the graphics in and of themselves. It's quite funny that they actually commented about Blue Point's remaster of Demon Souls and kind of like almost a nervousness about it. They literally came out saying, oh, they've set the bar very high. We're not sure if we can meet that. Like, I think that's amazing they said that, because I think the way the pure graphics look in the remake of Demon Souls on the PS5 is like the pinnacle of the Souls series. But I much prefer the art style in this game. And I'm not as well versed as you guys, but when I played Dark Souls Remastered, so obviously it's a remastered version, but I found the graphics in that awesome because of the art style and the pacing of the story. And I feel like I've spoken more about Dark Souls than Elden Ring in this podcast, but when you first get to Anor Londo, it's like, holy shit. Like it's like, I didn't know, I was playing it blind. I'm like, wow, this is fucking incredible. What the hell is this? Right. And I felt like that in this game.
San Orlando, bitch.
I felt it like straight away in this game. Like you get into the open area and you're looking around, you're like, whoa, what the hell is this? This is
It's a game full of Anolondos. That's what it is.
Yeah. It's like so many of those vistas, and there's structured moments, especially late game, where you can kind of look back at the whole world. Yeah. And you're like, holy shit. Like, I was over there, man. I had this experience there. And like the graphics for me, like, it's like a 10 out of 10. Like, I don't need it to be, you know, what do they call it, 4K. You know, like everyone talk about Ratchet and Clank and things like this and these type of games, but to me, it's like I care more about this. Like, give me a 1080p that's got the best art style and execution than the highest fidelity, you know, door that's in a game. It's like I don't really give a shit about that. But the sound, Swinny, the sound.
Look, I'll try to make this a bit quick.
No, you don't need to make it
Some
quick.
of the boss music in
slow,
this
Swinny.
game, some of this boss music in this game is incredible. And
Yeah.
I mean, FromSoftware have really picked up, especially Bloodborne was really where like they just went all balls to the wall with their boss music. But this game, and I'll mention what boss it is in the spoiler section, because we'll likely talk about that boss anyway. Has hey, I'm alluding to it. I'm hyping it.
That was just a quick one. That was just a tip.
It has my favorite track in any Souls game.
Oh.
So
I think I know which one it might
love
be.
it. Yeah, I absolutely love the music in this game.
I was ready to go to war when someone's like, "Oh, I'm so sick of the intro music to this game." I'm like, "Are you fucking serious?" Like when I booted up, so my experience is like, got this in day one, and I don't know how many weeks did I play it for, like 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I don't know, and I haven't played it for about a month. And as soon as I booted it up again, I'm like, yeah, like, I'm ready to fucking go.
I would, no joke, I would load it up and then go grab a drink while it's sitting there just to make sure it hit the crescendo before I hit load game or whatever. So.
I listened to that way too many times though, because I would often quit the game just to go back to the menu, and then I'll just leave it there for a while. And the game would just be sitting there for half an hour or something.
It's
running.
hype.
Not necessarily because I really love the song. It's just what would happen. So I heard that way too many times. But the music is fantastic. Although I still have to say that some of the tunes from some of the other games are still more memorable to me. If I was to kind of like the you know that the one that goes da-na, da-na, da-na,
You're gonna get a copyright strike.
Anyway,
Tell us in the spoiler chat.
there's certain music from the previous ones that I think are a little bit more memorable for me, but the dynamic music was also really cool because obviously it's an open world, so as you go into battle, you get that intensity building up because of the music that dynamically plays, and it's been flawless. It just fits so perfect, and it fades away so perfectly when you're out of battle and stuff like that. So, yeah.
And probably the last thing before we move on to our sort of final thoughts before the real, we can pull off the spoiler. Woo! The spoiler.
Better get your spoilers in before it's not
the classic, you know, PS5 versus Xbox. We don't actually really care about these kind of stuff. You guys own both of those consoles anyway.
I own multiple copies of the game on all the platforms. So,
but it feels like play it on console over PC. That's the most important recommendation. Whatever your platform is, grab it. The ultimate way to play it currently, it's got to be the way that Swinny plays it. Xbox Series X, playing it on a OLED, LG C1, lowest input lag, and then it's got that variable refresh rate.
Although I don't know, with the variable refresh rate getting patched into PS5, I don't know if there's any tests out there with how that currently works on Elden Ring.
The Digital Foundry have already posted a video about it.
Is it better in theory because you get naturally the higher frame rate?
I think there's some issues with the way that they're doing variable refresh rate on the PS5, which is classic Sony in this domain versus Microsoft. I think it works fine for Elden Ring. So I think technically it's better, but it's not as seamless the way you set it up and turn it on and everything like that. And it doesn't work for all games. It doesn't work for Gran Turismo, the VRR. Like, how is that possible?
Honestly,
like
though, yes, I noticed the frame drops. I didn't give a shit at all. I did not care. I played it, and at a certain point, it wasn't even a thing to me anymore in my head. I was just playing the game. You know what I mean? It wasn't severe enough to ever distract me.
I definitely noticed it.
I noticed it, but it never, ever distracted me throughout the 160 odd hours.
I had one moment where it dropped for me. Obviously, VR is kind of like, it's not technically 60, but whatever. I'm looking at it.
Saves a lot,
The only time it ever dropped for me, was I had like 3 dragons at once attacking me, and it was just absolute mayhem. And I noticed like a slight. I'm like, oh, that was
Was that 3 frames of
that
drop?
was weird for a second.
This game is shit.
I think for me, like, and I don't really understand it fully, but for me, when you go into performance mode, to me that should just be 60. Like, drop everything you need to do to keep it 60, right?
Yeah.
And I still don't understand why that's not possible. Like, it feels like a choice, and it kind of pisses me off.
I wonder. I don't know if this is the case, but I mean, I'm assuming this is an engine. This is basically like an enhanced version of the engine they've used for like Sekiro.
Yeah, it's From's engine. Yeah.
And I just wonder, maybe it's just like a little outdated in that regard, that they maybe couldn't get everything they needed out of it, even though these new consoles are really powerful. Maybe it's just the engine holding them back. I don't know.
But I think it's something that you see in a lot of games now. Like, thank God we're getting to the point where, you know, people can preference 60 frames per second performance versus balance modes. But I just think the definition to me, performance equals 60 frames. Yeah. Solid. Like, drop everything. Drop the resolution, drop the textures, just have a grey box version. Drop the pants, exactly. All right, let's get to the final bit before we go into spoiler territory, true spoiler territory. Other thoughts, Swinny?
Yeah, look, the only thing I kind of wanted to say is, look, there are some things that I think they could have done a little bit better. Probably not going to list them all because I feel I've been a bit too negative.
Let's keep shitting on the game. Yeah. 10 out of 10.
There are things like, they're like, look, you can give me a point for this. You can give me a spoiler point for this.
Whoa.
There are like painting puzzles, right? And they just
I like those.
I liked them, but they just felt very out of place for a FromSoft
Oh,
game.
it felt weird as hell.
Yeah, and I think that
weird.
And Mario Odyssey did that, which was cool, but it was
Zelda
just
did it. Breath of the Wild did it. That's what it felt like. It felt like they're trying to copy Breath of the Wild or something.
And
it's weird.
I was just like, I don't know. So there's certain things like that. And
it was a treasure hunt.
And for a quality of life, I wish they would have done, even if it was a talisman or something.
A what?
Oh,
talisman.
Oh, zing!
Catching up in the final
three.
You've already said the word.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You
all right, fine. Give me a point.
Spoiler-edited.
Have I still not got any spoilers?
Well, I think you had.
Even if it was a talisman, I wish there was a way.
Oh, what a talisman! Oh, give him another one.
This show is not long enough, Mike. Just keep dragging it on.
You feel like it's too long?
Crafting a lot of the crafting materials you get from wild animals out in the world, and while you can pick up materials when you're on torrent, I just wish there was a way that just for those wild animals that you just kill them and it just automatically gets.
Oh, yeah. I love those kind of items where it's like you do something and it's like magnetic, just sucks it in. Give me that talisman.
But also guaranteed drops, not.
Well, it's just like
not guaranteed jobs.
Just these items that are just literally that's the only use for those wild animals other than flavor in the world. Just don't make it so I have to turn around once and every time.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good call. That's a very nitpick. That's a big nitpick.
Yeah, it's a nitpick. I just need to get off my chest.
But do we want to go through story and lore?
Yeah, go swing.
I think the reason why I put this here was just for anyone that didn't want to watch the other thing part, just maybe just giving our overall like TLDR on if we liked what they did or didn't. That's all. So
I did, but I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I got it, but I didn't get it.
Dude,
just like every other Dark Souls game ever. So,
but I felt that Dark Souls, I had no fucking clue what the hell was going on at all.
Yeah, there's a bit more clue in
pretty much zero. Like literally zero. Like all the stuff at the end of the game. And shit's going on fire and stuff. I'm like, what the? Like, I have no idea what's just happened. And I love this game, right? At least with this, it was more like watching a movie and you're kind of going, yeah, there's something there. And I just don't really understand it. That's how I felt because I wasn't reading all the stuff. I did listen to the dialogue. I didn't skip the dialogue this time. Because I usually just skip the dialogue. I'm like, shut up.
But even if you do, you need one of those boards, like you're hunting a serial killer or something, and you gotta stitch together the connections. And this character had a particular line that talked about this other thing, and you're like, of course, that's what that means. But
I'll say like this, Mike, that I've subsequently watched some lore videos, and it's like, oh, I see how those pieces fit. Whereas I've watched lore videos for Dark Souls, I'm like, so
like,
that's what the game was about. Like, that's a pretty massive difference. That's a
No,
pretty
you're right.
massive
That's
difference.
a huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's definitely easy to understand.
Yeah,
But
my
still
overall
esoteric.
thoughts is because even the Souls games I haven't played, I'm very familiar with the lore and stories of them. This is easily my favorite lore that they've done in a game, and I have no idea. I know that the very broad out strokes were done years and years ago by George R. R. Martin, who we haven't mentioned his name at all.
Spoiler.
That's not a spoiler. If there's any credit goes to him for some of the cool overarching ideas, then cool. But obviously, a lot of the smaller details are done by FromSoft and Miyazaki, and I love learning about this world. And there's the unfortunate part is some people aren't going to get that experience because they don't realize that that lore is hidden. Especially people that have never played a Souls game. I saw a YouTuber that. What are you doing, Mike? I saw
Lore.
I saw a YouTube video, or at least someone like reacting to it, that was basically of a person who never played the Souls game before, saying, "Well, I came up against this boss, but I didn't understand their backstory. I would have cared more if they told me their backstory, and their backstory was there. It's just that they didn't go explore it, and they didn't read, they didn't pay attention, and that's the unfortunate part, is that some people will probably not realize that
because the backstory was on an item that was in a cave.
Well,
you had to read the description. Of this
no. In this case, without spoilers, it was told plainly to you, but you just didn't find. If you just didn't find it, and so there's. But that's what I do love about it. That's what I love about the Souls games, is that it gets the community to band together. You learn the bits and pieces you learn through your experience, and then you fill in the gaps via replaying the game or hearing other people talk about it. And it's such a wonderful way to learn a world. When it comes to a story, I mean, these games generally have bare bones plots. We're not talking a plot here. You go there and you do that thing. It's about the world. That's
super rich world, super rich lore.
Yeah.
Fuck all story to some extent.
And I was just going to say, Mike, that the thing that I love about it is where people are so adamant about their analysis of the lore. And for me, that's almost like when you've hit a winner. You know what I mean? Like, where it's like people go, but look at these 5 things, and this is why X is Z, and then someone comes back with, yeah, but this says that, but that's like obviously the intention of the artist, right? And it's funny how people fall in those traps and not realize the ambiguity is kind of like inherent in the art and on purpose and intentional. But to me, it's like I still don't really understand the Dark Souls 1 lore and story. But to me, this is just like leagues ahead of it, because it just explains more of it, but without laboring it. Like, I'm definitely the kind of person that, like, you give me too much story, I'm like, fuck, I'm over it. Like, I'm gonna bail on this game, right? Whereas this was just like perfect. It was like enticing little bits. It's like an 80-hour game, right? It's probably easy to balance it out, but it just felt like when a new, part of the story was unveiled, I was like, oh, shit, like this character's come back. Whoa, what the fuck's happening? It was really, really cool. And I definitely wouldn't say this about Dark Souls, but I would love to watch, like, whatever it is, an HBO Elden Ring series. Like, that to me would be fucking cool. Like, that to me is like the way to do it. Like, you could just go deep on different parts of the show, of the game. I really hope they do something like that. It's like probably the rare era this game launched that they could actually potentially do that. So,
well, we're going to wrap up our final thoughts, and I guess we have to do a couple of things.
Yes.
One is to decide individually how we feel that this game compares to other FromSoft Souls games. Obviously, the ones that we've played or we're comfortable with, and also where do they go from here. So
I'll bring up the tier list now, but no.
no tier list, no tier list.
All right. Who goes first?
Go Swin.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
honestly, I'm still trying to figure this out. I've gone back and forth on Elden Ring so long. When I first started, like the first say 20 hours, I was like, man, this is the best game they've made that I've ever played. And then as I started to see some of the cracks, some of the flaws that we brought up throughout this long review,
Cracked pots.
it kind of it brought me back down to earth a little bit, but then definitely finished on a high for me, and I hadn't seen the best parts of the game at that point as well. But honestly, I don't know. I definitely can't place it above Dark Souls 1 yet. I feel as the years go on, maybe, as the more I watch and the more I watch other people experience the game and the more I learn and discover about the lore, the more I love it. But I think it is just flawed enough that Dark Souls 1 is still the bigger masterpiece for me. And I think Elden Ring and the other two Dark Souls games are going to fight it out for a while. It's a very good chance it'll end up being that second place for me. So,
but can I just ask you quickly, just to clarify, because like masterpiece is like, yeah, it's so interesting what the words we're even using, right?
Yeah.
In terms of just loved the game, which one, and it's still fresh, but which one do you feel like you loved more?
I still think Dark Souls 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Mike?
But the thing is, I was just going to say, like, I still have huge love for the other two Dark Souls games, so it's really tough for me. But yeah.
Well, maybe I'll go because you played them all, Mike. I just I literally cannot go past Dark Souls because to me, that game has no fat for me. But actually, there's some areas which are pretty shit actually. But it's more like edit 5% of that game, maybe 3%, right? And the puzzle box nature of that game and how tightly it's so integrated, interwoven, and just the fact that game, although it was building on the shoulders of Demon Souls, it propelled things so much more. And there was really important changes in Dark Souls. I just think Dark Souls is a top 10 game of all time, and I don't see Elden Ring supplanting it, to be honest. So, but it's I'm actually gonna look forward to going back to the other Souls games to see then for me because I feel wow, their bar's so high. Right. Elden Ring and Dark Souls 1. It's as other games come in, where do they sort out Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne and stuff like that? Because people are Bloodborne, hey, best game ever. So it's gonna be fun to go back and play them. How about you, Mike?
No, it's going to feel like I'm just copying homework here, but I totally agree with you guys. I think at the start, absolutely, man, this is the best Souls game ever, one of the best games I've ever played, and it still is one of the best games I've ever played. But when I let the dust settle, it felt like Dark Souls 1 was still a better overall experience. And I also need to put into the context of, much like, a game of some other year, to remember what it was like when I first played Dark Souls and to remember the experiences that I had when I first played Dark Souls versus the way I'm feeling about things now. And it's hard to compare apples with apples. It's kind of like the first time you fell in love versus the woman you married kind of thing. It's a different experience. I hate to put it that way, but it is. It's a totally different experience because you as a human being are different in both those experiences. And I think it's the same thing. I think this is now the 6th game in the Souls series, if my maths is correct. I don't know. Dark Souls 1, 2,
if you count
3,
Sekiro,
Bloodborne.
7,
Okay, 7th.
But I wouldn't count Sekiro.
Yeah, it's tough. It's if you count Sekiro, you count the Kingsfield games. So it's kind of I agree. I think 6 is
6 is right.
So at that point, and having played and gone through that journey, whilst it's absolutely the most refined of all the games, it's got the most options of all the games, the most content of all the games, you just can't beat the experience of the original Dark Souls. And therefore, yeah, in my mind, Dark Souls 1 will always be on top of probably every single other game in the series. And I just don't see how, to be honest, I actually don't see how any game could ever surpass Dark Souls because of that. You could have a perfect Dark Souls 4, and I still don't think it's going to be a better game to me than Dark Souls 1.
No, I'd say I've got imagination. 100% you could get a better game than Dark Souls 1.
Absolutely you could. But the problem is...
I haven't even played Bloodborne. I know a lot of people are Bloodborne is better than Dark Souls. and like
Yeah.
people who love the Souls series. So I'm totally open to it not being the best.
Oh, I'm open to it too. I just know it's probably not going to happen.
I'll definitely say this. This to me is not the greatest game of all time. I can already say that. And I feel like this is the end of shitting on the game. Because I definitely would give this 10 out of 10. If I was reviewing this game for like an
easily.
IGN,
Yeah.
like I probably would give it like, oh no, because they've got like only 10-point scale
Maybe
right now.
9.5.
So I'd give it a 10. No, they've only got 10 points.
Oh, then I'll run it up.
I'd give it 10
for sure.
easy. But if I had to give it out of 100, even then, I'd probably give it like
98.
96, I reckon. Maybe 95, because I'd knock it just because it's
the old
too high.
Hyper Magazine scoring.
Yeah, 95.
97?
I'll give it
97?
95. 95. Okay. So, what would you give it, Swinny, out of 100?
Out of 100, I'd probably give it a good old 97, I think.
Really?
It's
Okay.
So, yeah, this
that's
game, look, as much as we have, it's pretty obvious that we love this
Oh,
game,
it's
right?
freaking awesome game.
I think that we needed to get the things that maybe we didn't
Yeah.
love off our chest, and because that's the more interesting stuff to talk about.
Well, it's so
everyone else
good.
talks
It's so
about how
good. You
good
can
it
just
is, so yeah.
bang on about how good
So
it is. Right?
as much,
So,
this game is phenomenal. Play this goddamn game,
and
people.
you can have the last say, like out of 100, Mike, before we move on to spoilers.
96.
Oh, so 95, 96, 97. There you go.
Yeah. Absolutely a solid 96.
That's actually like the Metacritic score, 96.
There you go. We we dissed it a lot for better or worse, but I've spoken about this game before and how much I freaking love it. And I love the choices in it. I love the choice of weapons in it. I love the characters. I love the NPCs. I love the quest lines in it, the world, the graphics. All of that stuff is absolutely superb. Not as good as Dark Souls, but it's superb.
Sorry, I'm trying not to laugh, but I would love if one of us did like a supercut of all the criticisms, but like it's literally 1 hour and 45 minutes through this supercut. I hate this, and then go at the end 96, 95, 97.
Well, it was like when I talked about Valhalla on the show, and I was like, the only thing I did was just shit on the game.
Yeah, that's
but I'm
true.
like, I love this game. It's bloody A tier in my tier list.
All right, let's rip the Band-Aid off. We're talking about spoilers, baby. So if you're up to this point, now I can remove these because it doesn't matter. Yeah, so
Talisman.
if you've made it this far,
Yeah, so the game has talismans.
and
yeah.
you feel like you haven't spoiled the game so far, you should exit right now because we're going to intentionally ruin this game for you if you're still here.
Yeah, warning. We
All
might.
right.
What if people tune in or skip to certain bits? Do we need to keep reminding people there's
No,
spoilers?
I've got the
or
spoiler
that's it?
alert thing.
Point of no
The spoiler alert.
And also it'll be in the little like
spoilers.
thing of the search bar or whatever.
Yeah, it says the non-canon
timeline.
spoiler chat.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
Oh
I don't want
yeah!
to spoil you or anything for anyone.
Spoiler alert.
All right, let's kick off.
Yeah.
What build did we use?
The wretch.
Bloody Mike! I followed
you
your
wrecked it
advice
for me.
and I had a horrible time with your
Why?
advice.
Really? I loved
Yeah.
it. Okay, so
The
Yeah.
first hour and a half of playing as a wretch, I was like, fucking, this was the
Yeah.
worst decision.
We all played
Really?
Wretch, and all thanks to Mike, and I'm like, this is the dumbest fucking
I
decision.
loved it.
I could have played in a samurai instead of a
Man,
fucking Wretch.
You could have, but it was a different experience. I think
Worse.
to me, it was actually one of the greatest experiences of the entire game. No, I'm not even kidding. I'm not absolutely not
But
even
you're
kidding.
like, oh, it
was-
was a shield. You're the first merchant has a shield. I'm like, okay, well, I just need to go grind some
yeah,
money to
sure,
get a shield.
but I was still naked, so ooh.
But he sells clothes as well.
No, but that
couldn't
was.
afford him. I couldn't afford anything.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Mike. Like, I don't mind that part of it. Like, that was kind of crazy to have nothing and
It
try
was
to
awesome. I
try to
loved
build
it.
your character up a little bit. 'Cause
I
you're
had to use a
"Shit."
stupid club for the first, God knows, like 2 hours of the game or something, clubbing everything to
That's
death.
right. I used that damn club.
And I ended up, I remember one of the most memorable parts of the entire game is somewhere in the Weeping Peninsula, I think it
Yes,
was.
we talk about things.
Yeah.
We can talk about it.
Yeah.
There's a single
motherfucker.
enemy. I forget what the hell the enemy type. It's some dude on the beach next to
Don't
a
spoil it.
bonfire.
It's
And-
like the Alabaster Lords, the gravity dudes.
Yeah, one of those dudes, I think it is. And I remember coming across him, I'm like, this guy's gonna be fucking tough. Like, I had my club, and I think by that point I had pants, maybe. I think.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Club
I
and
had
pants.
pants. Mike,
I had
2022.
pants. And I remember winning that fight. It was really hard, but I won that fight. And he dropped his armor, and I'm like, holy fuck! I put the armor on, first piece of armor I got in the entire game. It was amazing, and I used that armor for ages as part of the game. And that experience of starting everything from scratch and having to actually find all the different items and having to really fight for survival, to me, super elevated the start of the game. But it's weird because it's a binary experience. You don't know what it would have been like if I did start as a samurai, how much different the experience would have been. But I have no regrets. I fucking loved that experience.
Because for me, like, I was club boy as well, and then hit the first tree sentinel at the start of the game, which is like a bit of the joke of the game. I'm like, fuck, what the hell? And I'm like, okay, I feel like it's like a Miyazaki thing of like, this is going to be a joke. It's like this weapon or whatever this enemy has, it's going to be really good, right? So I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to try to get this thing. And I went from club to golden halberd. Like, that was my progression. And I never changed the weapon again for the rest of the game, which
one
was
of the best strength weapons in the game.
but yeah, when you get to the late game, it's not so good, which we'll touch on later. But yeah, I do think that's funny. But now that I'm in New Game Plus, I'm like, great, now I can actually like try katanas and all the other kind of shit. But I would never recommend someone play it as a wretch, honestly.
I disagree. I highly recommend that's how you should start the game.
I don't think it's
Not
like
that anyone
adds
would
anything,
listen to this
really.
bit that hasn't probably played the game already, but I totally think it adds to it. The first 3 or 4 hours of the game were a more awesome, memorable experience for me than most of the rest of the game. They truly were.
So
Dude,
weird.
No, I'm not kidding. I loved it.
My enjoyment of the game went up 100-fold once I got the
Clothes.
Reduvia blade from, you know, when you go in Limgrave and you go below the it's like out from where the dragon is, and there's like a faked there's a scripted invader thing, and then that's where you're the bloody finger hunter or whatever comes in to help you and starts his quest. So the Reduvia blood blade that you get from that invader, I used that for like half the game and just absolutely rinsed all the enemies and bosses with that, because it not only was I doing an arcane build, which was, you know, focused on bleeding, that had a weapon skill that was a bleeding projectile. So I could just literally just keep freaking just throwing this thing at people, and just like most bosses weren't even touching me. I don't think I had any issues with any bosses. I didn't die to a single boss until like more than halfway through the game because of that weapon. But the reason why I went arcane was I had no idea if, you know, I know bleed is OP in this game. I had no idea about any of that stuff. All I saw was that there is a stat called arcane, and I didn't know what it did. Based on the name, I'm like, that must be something related to sorcery or something, some new kind of thing like hexes were in Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 1 DLC. And I'm like, so I went for arcane. I just started pumping all my points in arcane, and when I realized it actually impacted blood loss, I'm like, yes, I love bleed effects in games. It was perfect.
Well, that's the funny part, because you're always pro bleed, and then the fact that this game comes out, and to this day, patch 1.0.4.1, bleed is still OP. It's the strongest, you know, like weapon type class. So
I don't know if you can. Is it possible to restart that B-roll that you just did?
No.
Because you can't. Okay, that's fine.
Well, I don't think so.
No,
try.
that's fine. The reason,
there you go.
So that weapon there is my beloved. That is Eleanor's pole blade that I used the
pole.
entire game after. That's what I upgraded from the Reduvia, and that weapon had the coolest moveset and staggered enemies and bled enemies. So guess
They've
who
changed the stagger on it though in the new patch a little bit.
I was
They
playing with
reduced
it. I was playing with it yesterday, and it's still damn
Still
good.
Yeah.
I killed Melania on my second go with that bloody weapon.
Damn.
With help, obviously, I was also using Spirit Summons, right? I'm not a pro gamer or
So
anything.
it was you and
Plus at
a
a huge
second
level.
copy of you.
Yeah, but the
Your
point
mimic
is,
tier.
the
instead of
point is
Level
that
200.
the point is that
250.
weapon just suited me to a T, and it also staggered bosses, which just made it. It was glorious to play. I
And
loved
it looks bloody sick. It's one of the
loved it
coolest looking
so
weapons in
much.
the game.
So we were playing a blind, Mike and I, and even I knew from
I was
the
also playing
enemies.
it blind.
I'm just saying the context
okay.
because because like at the start of the game, people don't know the kind of like even the PvE meta. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like when I'm playing through it and I'm like getting fucked by these enemies doing bleed on me, right? And I'm like, man, this bleed feels like so overpowered. And I know Swinny's like always finding the angle on these kind of things. I'm like, our bleed must be good. And then it's like you can't even avoid hearing bleed, bleed's the best, bleed's OP, go bleed, all that kind of stuff.
Rivers of Blood, I used it for 2 bosses that were, because it's so quick, that like, which is the Elden Beast and Placidusax, I think that's how you say it, the big double head dragon, because they're in the bosses that ran away quickly. And we'll talk about Elden Beast in a second, but so I'm like, okay, I need something, because that pole blade had a long wind up, so it just wasn't good for those bosses. But other than that Rivers of Blood is just so OP that it's almost boring. That
It looks
weapon.
so cool.
It looks
and you
cool.
don't have to use the weapon. I mean, that's the problem.
but that's
you
what
want
I'm
to kind
saying.
of use it,
Yeah, but you do though. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
It kind of like, but its moveset was boring to me. Although I do like a good katana moveset like the Uchi and stuff. But obviously, Rivers of Blood is like just absolutely hated by the community for being so OP. It's kind of hilarious.
Well, yeah, but like that's more the PvP stuff, right?
Even people hate it. Like, people have this weird thing of like, oh, we think a weapon is too overpowered even for beating bosses. We must nerf it. And it's like, let people just have their fun.
Kind of
man.
breaks
It's a
the
video
game to a degree, right? But
It makes it a lot easier, that's for sure.
I'm okay if it's like, hey, this is the final weapon. Like what is the wave of gold, or is that what it's called?
Yeah, Wave of Gold, which is the weapon you get from the last boss.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like okay with that because it's a bit like, okay, you're beating the game. If you want to play the game, use this
exactly.
weapon.
But even that is semi-situational.
Yeah,
It's not
but see,
so
I
OP
like
that it works
that.
everywhere.
Whereas Rivers of Blood is like, it is like they had to keep they've nerfed
Really
it twice,
good.
I think, from memory.
At least Rivers of Blood is given to you in a very late game
That's
area.
true.
It's very late game, yeah.
Unless you
There's
just
ways
skip
to get
everything.
it though. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can also get it like playing co-op and stuff, but you can probably get anything that way. But I mean, they at least did place it towards the end of the game.
Yeah, I am for one looking forward to getting rid of my golden halberd and trying any other
Trying
weapon.
something different.
I-
But the golden halberd's a good weapon. It's a fun weapon.
Man, like when we get to Elden Beast, God, that would have been a nightmare to kill that thing with that.
Yeah, I'll cover that.
Oh my God.
Let's sit in that pocket when
Let
we
me
get
talk
to it.
about my favorite weapons, of which I have many. I'm
Oh,
not
and can
gonna
you tell
talk
the
about all of them,
katana,
but,
the Uchi katana story with us?
which Uchi katana?
The only
specifically?
time that we've fucking co-opted.
Oh yeah, that we co-op where you dropped a second Uchi. Well, you tried to drop a second Uchi, and in the process of you dropping a second Uchi, instead of dropping it, you deleted it.
Yeah, but the words are fucking like horrendous. I was following a guide. The guide had a different word, and it was like, I don't know, leave? I think it's leave or place or something like that. Do you
Yeah.
remember what it is, Swinny? What the words are for PV? Like,
There was a drop or leave. Or,
I don't think it's drop.
Oh yeah,
There's
no,
two
there's-
words that are.
It's leave and discard.
Yeah,
That's
you're
right.
leaving
Keep
discard. To me,
place-
it's the fucking same word, man.
And
Which I
said
don't
on
actually know which one's the right one, actually, now.
on the show when you
discard
said
is
this.
the wrong one.
Okay.
I went on the show when you talked about this in the main podcast. I gave you so much credit because everyone, especially in Dark Souls, when you're trading with the crows, everyone at some point has accidentally discarded an important
Something,
item
yeah,
that
that's
you're
really
like,
important.
oh
Yeah.
my- ah.
And it wasn't a big deal
And it
because
saves and shit.
I just, got my like little
you
mule
just get another.
character to get another one, but it was more
Exactly.
amusing. So that was the two Uchis,
But-
so you could have two
But I did
Uchis.
actually use that Uchi that he gave me. So
Yeah, thank you.
the Uchi once I found it just because I love playing as the Uchi, just because I love the way it looks, was the weapon that carried me through a good chunk of the game. With the Hard Frost Stomp, which I
At the
played
start of the
while
game,
it
it
was
was
still
insane, yeah.
ridiculously overpowered.
That was,
Even-
like,
honestly,
broken.
even after the patch, it was still really good.
It's
I
meant to
tried-
be
Really, really
powerful,
good.
but not overpowered.
No, but it's pretty bloody good even
I
after.
tried that out after hearing about it, like when I was near the end of the game, and I'm like, man, this weapon art.
It's
That's,
ridiculous.
yeah, like,
It was. Did you try it while pre-patch?
No, this would have been post-patch.
So-
Oh man, pre-patch was ridiculous.
I know this is a bit out of order now, but with the spirit summons, for the third time now that we'll cover it, but the mimic tier is like, I played that for one night the old version of it, right? And that version was fucking Stomp Beast, like 3000. It fucking fucked people up. Like it kind of, I can understand why they had to change it. Like really, like.
And I don't mind that.
I can't say the R word, but it went from being like a genius one night, and then it got patched, and I'm like, oh my god, I just got the Mimic tier, and it's been patched, to being a total moron. Like I'll go into battle, and
it was
like,
way worse, yeah.
and the Mimic tier is still one of the best spirit summons, right?
Still got me through.
But it's
But the way it was
tough
before,
bosses.
dude,
Yeah.
like
Well, they balance it more
it is
clearly.
crazy.
More correctly. Yeah.
It was insane. It was so awesome. I wish I played the whole game like that. I understand how people said they like literally like many bosses were just beaten by the Mimic tier. Like it makes sense in the old world. So
I was watching one of I think Vardy's most recent video where he talks about some really cool little gameplay tricks. And one I didn't know was, you know, Shiburi's woe, which attracts enemies' attention.
oh yeah.
What you can do is you can equip one on yourself, summon the Mimic tier, and then unequip the talisman and put something else on, which means only the Mimic tier draws the aggro.
Sick.
That's awesome. I'll just be back in 1 second. You guys talk about your favorite stuff.
Oh.
Yep, sure. That is an awesome. That absolutely awesome. So, but throughout the game, I'm just naturally drawn to the katanas for some reason. So, I did use Moonveil for quite a bit of it. Again, I tried not to spam the special attack. I don't. Did you use Moonveil into God throughout the game?
No, not one.
Amazing.
No, I told you I
amazing
used
weapon.
one
Really cool
weapon for the whole
moveset.
game.
Okay. Moonveil was fantastic. When I came across that, I'm like, what the hell is this? Played around with it. Because that is the one thing. As I was coming across a weapon, as long as I could obviously equip it and I could use the skill on it, I would try it out. I'd try out all sorts of different weapons, and I enjoyed doing that. And some, it's a tough one because some, unless you upgrade them, they're going to seem shit. So it's really hard to really judge. So it's more like, is it worth spending my precious resources upgrading this because I feel like there's something good there, or should I just leave it alone? And there's a few things where I upgraded and I ended up regretting wasting resources because I realized maybe it's not it just looks cool, but it's not as powerful as I thought it would be. But it was still worth experimenting. So.
I reckon that's the thing that shits me the most about New Game Plus. I kind of get it. I can imagine that they could still do it without doing the way they did it, but that you lose all the bell bearings.
Yeah.
That just shits me. Like I didn't realize that. I kind
sucks a bit.
of wish I did one or two other things before going into New Game Plus because I was like, shit, all my bell bearings are gone. So upgrading, it's very slow in this game, and for the amount of weapons you have, I didn't face this problem because I only used one weapon for the whole game, basically. Well, two weapons, club and golden halberd. But it's like, I could imagine it being really frustrating. It's like, hey, I got like 5 or 10 weapons I want to use. I don't have enough somber stones. I don't have enough smithing stones. And then like me, now that I'm in New Game Plus, it's like, oh shit, like I got to go get those bell bearings again to be able to make it a lot easier.
I
and quicker,
hoarded.
so-
I think I hoarded about 20 of the somber ones, and
before jumping into New Game
before
Plus,
jumping in, just
that's
in
what
case
they always say, right?
I wanted to go and upgrade it because I didn't. But even within the game itself, I tried a whole bunch of different weapons. Tried some dual wielding. Tried some to get the synergy between them, and I enjoy doing that. So did I have a favorite weapon? Absolutely, the Uchi Katana. In the end, if I was to put the number of hours that I used it for, because
You really are a Dark Souls 1 fan. Aren't you?
I am. Because at one point, I tended to use the shield quite a bit still. But at one point, I was running around with one Uchi that had frost and one Uchi that had bleed.
That's cool.
That was just a crazy good combo where we're just because it would proc both.
That's crazy. You can do
and
that.
It's very
just
similar
ripped
to
through shit.
it's very similar to Let Me Solo Her. Build.
Pretty much.
But
And
Yeah,
looks
it
cool.
actually is. Yeah. Hey, all right. Can
it
we
works
jump?
really well.
Can we jump into locations?
yeah,
And
let's talk about
can we do something? Let's see if we can synchronize. Can we just say the name of the region we dislike the most?
Oh, come on, it's obvious.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Caleb.
Limgrave.
Caelid.
I mean Caled.
Caleb is like, it's so. I know it's meant to be oppressive, like that's kind of the intention, but it just never quite clicked with me. It's the area I
wasn't
spent the
fun.
least time in.
It just
Like-
wasn't fun.
No.
To explore.
Yeah. it's just kind of shit.
Why is
and-
that in the end? Is it just because it was hard? Or
I
is it
think
just
But it wasn't
'cause
even that it was hard necessarily.
annoying enemies. What the hell was it?
I think the design as well. So you can't like cross the lands easily. You kind of have to go around unless you go straight through the swamp, the lake of rot thingy. But I think it's honestly for me, it was a combination of the enemies and just maybe the color palette just kind of
Yeah, I
just
think it's
over
the
time I
art.
just got sick of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the enemies in there, like the dog dragon things. I just
Hated
think
them.
they
I
look,
hated the crows.
I think they were the lamest enemy in the whole game. Like this, and there's some odd enemies in the game, but it's kind of kitschy and it just works. And for me, that didn't work. Like when I first got to that region, I was like, "Where the fuck am I?" I think I got teleported there. I'm
Yeah.
like, "What the fuck are these like dog things? They look stupid."
I
And
love
I'm dead.
I love all the lore and the what that area represents in terms of the fact that it's it's the fallout from Radahn and Melania's battle and in
Yeah.
the lore and everything. Like I love the idea of it, but it just wasn't a fun experience to explore. And like when Mike nailed it on the head when when we were talking on the show and I said I'd hit a bit of a barrier. Part of it's because I was exploring through Caelid with vigor at like 15. And I was
Oh,
and I was like,
one shot all over the place.
I'm just like every single enemy is
That's
like
not fun.
would kill you in one hit, and I'm like, of course I need to upgrade that stuff, but it was just like a combination of everything and I was pushing myself to play through it, and I got a bit sick of it. But there's parts I like about it. Like I love the sound design in that area. It is like the way, as you said, oppressive. It makes you so tense. It's like a really really cool usage of. It's like minimal. It's not really. It's almost like what's the term? Soundscaping, rather than a song or
Yeah.
anything. So I think if that's
Ambient
what they wanted to
soundscape, yeah.
achieve, you don't want to be here. Then they obviously achieved it.
Yeah, and I do genuinely think that's what they were trying to do, but I just find that other sort of forms of art can make you feel really tense. I don't know if you've ever watched the movie Mother, but that movie, fuck me, like
So
by the end of
intense,
it,
man.
especially being like a dad,
Yeah.
I was like, Jesus Christ, this movie's like visceral,
Yeah,
right?
I loved it.
Aronofsky will do that.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He would
He's
with just about
amazing.
any of his
He's
films. Yeah,
amazing. But I never felt like that with this, right? It felt oppressive and annoying, and I just wanted to get out. And like I'm sure maybe we'll cover Radahn in Bosses, maybe not, but even that didn't redeem it for me. I almost like psychologically put the whole Radahn piece out of Caelid. It's almost like because it's off on that little edge bit.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that's not even Caelid. All the rest of it's Caelid. That's shit. And this is the good Radahn bit. So yeah, Caelid, man, that sucks. But let's talk about bits that we did like. So Mike, what's your favorite area?
Oh, see, going back to what we discussed about starting as a wretch and starting the game off and having that real proper sense of exploration and not knowing what's at every corner, I'd actually say Limgrave. The original starting part was one of my favorites. I love the Stormhill Castle. In terms of the fact that it was one of the legacy dungeons, so you got a really cool experience of exploring and opening pathways and stuff.
God damn, for the first legacy dungeon, or like what you kind of told to do first in a way, that place was huge. It was like it's
Dude, I didn't even know
really
it had
big,
the
yeah.
underground bit until Mike told me about it. He's like, have you beaten the underground boss? I'm like, what?
yeah.
There's another boss down there? Yeah, it's insane.
And I like the visual art style of I think it's the Ainsel River, the
Ainsel River, yeah.
yeah, the underground area. I didn't necessarily like the area itself, but the art style and the feel of it was really cool with the stars in the sky that was actually underground stars, and I think it's Mog's one of the two, his
Mogwin
palace
Dynasty, yeah.
Yeah, the palace that you can sort of
Mogwin
see
Palace.
somewhere up in the distance. I just love the feel and look of that. We joke about Caelid, but to be completely honest, the snow areas for me were actually kind of disappointing. I love snow areas in games. I love the fact that this included a snow area, but I did not like being in those snow areas. And I don't know, like for example, how and I know from a lore perspective, I'm sure it makes sense, although I don't actually understand why. But the fact that he had spirit trees or trees that were like ghost trees as part of the landscape, that actually kind of put me off. I don't know why. I just felt
Yeah.
like
I like that.
it,
I like that.
but I get it that it had that certain aesthetic, but I didn't get why, and it kind of took away from the immersion of it for me for some reason. It's hard to describe. In the whole area, I was actually just disappointed. Caled was annoying and shit, but with that, I was actually looking forward to exploring a snow area, and I was really disappointed that I didn't enjoy exploring the snow area in the end. And man, when you then get into the optional what's the name of that option?
The
The
consecrated
consecrated snowfields,
Fuck
the
that
start of
place.
it specifically more than
Yeah,
anything was fucking annoying. And I get that it's part of the game. Did you go to the consecrated snowfield
No,
in
no,
Sagat?
no.
So you're in the middle of a snowstorm at the start of that area, and it's annoying as fuck. And you lose your sense. It's not that you lose your sense of direction. You run into random enemies that are pretty tough, and because I want to explore all the different areas. I don't even know if I've explored anything in there because I gave up because it was just shit and annoying.
It is very frustrating to explore. Like I agree. Like once you get out of that and the area clears up a bit,
It's nice.
still
I like the rest of it.
It's nice. It's still too big. Like it's bigger than it needs to be. But the consecrated snowfield. It's if only like Kaylee I just was miserable for me. Like, but that definitely I've got like a meh thing on mine, and I've got the consecrated snowfield and the meh.
Because, like, I just feel like the snow area, and I didn't explore enough of it, so I'm kind of a bit hesitant to judge it. But it kind of felt linear's not the right word, but piecemeal. Whereas, like, Limgrave felt like a real like area that's lived in. There's like overlapping sections,
Yeah, I agree.
and it was
Yeah.
all integrated and stuff. Whereas it almost felt like, there was like 3 teams working on the mountain area, and it was like we need to put these puzzle pieces together, and it just felt like those blocks, and I don't know, it was a bit odd to me. Like I got through that area and I'm like, oh, this is kind of weird, like, but I'm in the right place, but I don't know, it just felt a bit, like I said, piecemeal.
What's interesting is there's also a lot of graphical glitches in the mountaintop of the giants. Whereas where it's just you just see the textures all fucked up, and that's the only area I saw it in, and it really did give me the impression that it was rushed compared to.
I feel that
other
area was
But that's
absolutely
the thing
rushed,
where
yeah.
I'm even coming from. It's almost like this is the first draft. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like all these pieces together, and then it's like the next draft is all right. Now that we've got those pieces together, how do we reinforce them to make them feel real and lived rather than
That's
it's
why
a
I didn't-
game? So
That's why the tree. I feel like the ghost trees, whatever the hell they are, unless someone can explain the lore to me, it almost felt like they had to be added because otherwise the area just didn't look right or it was too plain.
I just thought it was like eerie. That's like, I don't know anything about the lore, but I liked it. I liked that part of it. But going back to positive stuff, but I mean, I'll just go first, Swinny, because it's boring. Because I've got the same as you, Mike. That my favorite area, like ultimately, was like Limgrave, like the connection between that Stormvale Castle,
Yeah,
like how
that
you can kind of navigate around that in a way that's like everyone does it, and then the Weeping Peninsula, like more on the whole west side, like that whole kind of like from south to north, like at the point where you're at Stormvale Castle. That to me is just so awesome. I love that whole area.
Same, yeah.
Like I feel like you could just spend 40 hours just doing that shit, and it's like
Probably
you
did
don't get
spend 40
bored.
hours
You
doing
like
that
it.
shit.
It's awesome. I think it is the best part of the game to me. Which it's quite a. I don't know what that means. Like, if you're gonna have a best part of the game, having it as the start of the game is probably a smart choice. But how about you, Swinny? What's your favorite areas?
Well, that's not the best part of the game for me, although I do like Limgrave. My favorite area in the game was the Legacy Dungeon, which is Raya Lucaria, the Academy of Raya Lucaria. I just thought that was just an absolutely wonderful... It wasn't as big. To me, I felt Stormvale was almost too big. That made me feel like I was playing a Souls game. Like it was so close, and it also had very Bloodborne vibes as well. I just love the visual design. I love. I'm not a huge fan of jumping on all the rooftop parts, but I just love everything about it, and
The hidden walls.
yeah, no, it just felt like, and it was such that
Yeah.
place is so important to the
very
lore
cool.
as
It
well.
was very cool.
That it just really kind of, because I explored all of Leonia before going there, so I learnt all about the wars between the previous wars between the. Well, actually, I think there was at the end they were warring between the Carrion royal family and the Academy, and just learning about how Radagon went to war with Renala and that, and then they ended up getting married at the Church of Vows and stuff like that. Like learning all about that lore and then going there was just such a magical moment for me. There's tons of great places, but that was a standout for me.
Yeah, that was a really sick legacy dungeon. I can't believe we haven't even said it. Like the fact that they added a jump in this game. And to me,
one of the main mechanics.
it was freaking awesome. Like,
oh, dude, I love it. Yeah,
that's
it'd be
almost
weird
like
not
the
having
biggest
it
criticism of like Dark Souls. It's so frustrating how to do the jump in that game when you need to do it, to a point where it's like, I wish they never had it in the game. Whereas this, like, I didn't mind the jumping puzzles and the platforming too much.
But you didn't do the subterranean
Yeah,
shunning
yeah,
grounds,
yeah,
which
that's
is the
it.
worst
Yeah.
part of the fucking game.
Yeah,
but it's not really an area because
Yeah,
it's so
yeah.
short.
Yeah, no,
Like that's
fair,
why
that's fair.
that made me want them to remove the fucking jump button. from the goddamn game.
Fair enough. But yeah, that's a good
Oh.
call, Sweetie. Is that like, do you want to mention any other areas or should we move on?
I think we should probably move on. There's
All
more
right,
to
let's
still
talk about bosses.
Oh, bosses.
Bosses. Do we want to go with the best ones because we've been shitting on the game so much?
Yeah.
Who wants to kick it off?
Swinny.
Well, right on the back of my favorite area, my favorite boss by far was Renala.
Oh,
I
interesting.
absolutely adored that battle, from the visual design, from the structure of it. It's a and the thing is as well. So there's gimmick boss fights in the Souls games and Bloodborne and Demon Souls and all that stuff. But what they did was they took a gimmick fight for the first phase and then they added an actual fight for the second one. And I just think it was the way they mixed that was fantastic, and the fact that that's also you met Rani, who introduced herself as Renna in the church at the beginning, and then during that fight, she actually she's the one that actually creates a projection of Renala, because Renala's all washed up. And it's actually Rani's projection of Renala that you're fighting in the second phase. And it's got the Moondrop background. It's very reminiscent of a certain Bloodborne boss that I won't spoil for Intergot, but it is just absolutely gorgeous. I love that fight. I love the lore behind it. And I also love probably what's going to be Intergot's boss, from what I've heard.
Oh, okay. I'll say two quick ones because I don't think they're like that big of a deal or anything. But Sir Gideon, because I didn't know what was going to happen in the game, right? So I'm just playing it, and then you start to fight him. I'm like, holy shit, this is like I don't know. I really liked it, right? And I didn't realize until after watching other people play it that if you don't beat him the first time, it's actually a lot harder. Because you can get some strikes on him at the start. So I just like, when people are talking, I'm like, I'm just going to beat the shit out of you, dude.
I thought you were going to talk about the coolest thing about that boss.
Oh, what is
So
which is
as with Sir Gideon, as you know, when you're talking to him throughout the game, you can almost like close off his dialogue things and he gives you rewards.
Yeah.
The more you tell him, the more attacks he has during his boss fight.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that.
If you tell him about Melania after beating Melania, he has one of her attacks during the boss
that's
fight.
so sick. That's cool.
That is a really cool mechanic.
To
I
be
had
fair,
no idea.
I killed him like so quickly. Like
I
don't
did
think
as well.
You didn't tell him anything, did you?
Like,
I
'cause
killed him super quick as well. Yeah,
I hit
but
him a
didn't
bunch of
realize.
times at the start, which you can only do the first go. So if you do it again, you can't do that. Like you just go straight into attack mode. So that's just a quick one. The other quick one is the fire giant. Like that's the one good part of like the snow area for me. I don't know why. I just really liked that.
It was a cool fight.
The
I really
design
enjoyed
of the
fight, yeah.
enemy,
Yeah.
like the boss, like the area. It felt like a cool juxtaposition. I don't understand the lore element of it, but it just was cool. It's like you're in this freezing area and then there's a fire giant. You know what I mean? It just felt really cool. But my favorite, and I actually, like, I don't understand the lore fully of this game or at all. But I wish this was like actually the final boss. And it doesn't make sense from a story perspective. But Godfrey for me, like
Yeah,
I beat Godfrey the first go, and there's part of it for me as well. It's like I don't necessarily want to have the hardest challenge for the final boss. By the way, like I feel like I've already got to the end. Like just don't go too crazy. And for me, it was like, it wasn't that hard. Like, but it was so fucking cool. And then the second phase of his fight, when he becomes almost like this wrestling warrior dude,
Comes Horaloo.
I'm like,
Horaloo.
I'm just like, holy shit, I love this. It's so campy and awesome. But it was just like, for me, perfectly executed. And when I got past that, I was like, fuck, I kind of thought it was the final boss. And I'm like, oh man, this is awesome, right? And then it gets into what the actual final boss is, which we'll cover. And I'm like, fuck this game.
What I love about that fight as well is because that's all stemming from the fact that, you are essentially part of his, like, he's your warlord. He was the head of the Tarnished. So it's just really. So he was the first Elden Lord. He got him and the Tarnished all got the grace removed, and then they essentially went to way to a faraway land. And this is them coming back, and he's there. And I don't know why he fights you. I don't understand that. If he's there to tarnish, he should want you to go into the fucking tree. But it was a cool fucking fight.
It's such a cool fight. I loved it. And also, by the way, with my son, he was constantly talking about the lion. Because, it's like part of the artwork and stuff like that. And he's like, I want to see the lion. I want to see the lion. I'm playing the game.
Show what happens to the lion.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
No, I didn't show that. But I'm like, where the fuck is the lion, dude, right? And then, it was like right at the end. I'm like, oh, that was actually a really cool moment for me. But how about you, Mike?
Well, look, it's going to have to be the Tibia Mariner. Best boss in the game.
The skeleton boat. The
skeleton boat, dude. Let's use this fucking enemy. Okay, all jokes aside, legit my favorite would have to be the Mimic tier.
Oh, dude, I had that on my list. That was actually on my list as well.
The main reason being the surprise.
Same.
Going into then going, wait a minute, that's me. He's got all my moves, motherfucker. I kind of, I don't regret that I beat him first go. It was a really good fight. I'm looking forward in New Game Plus to use the Mimic tier against the Mimic tier.
Can
I
you
think it's
summon
going to
it?
be kind of funny. I assume you can.
Just take off all your armor, and then when you get in there, and when it spawns, put your armor back on, and it's got
that was an awesome trick actually.
Can
that
you actually do
that? I didn't because I didn't. Yeah, you can. You can.
That's like
I
didn't know that.
It spawns based on the equipment you have when it spawns, so you could just.
That's cheap.
Which is awesome.
It's funny.
Super cheap.
It's
It's funny though.
It's funny.
But no, I had to do it legit. But what I loved about it is just a surprise because it was the
same.
most surprising boss. Every other boss, it's like, okay, cool. It's a big dragon. It's a dude with a lion. It's whatever. But this was like a total twist that I didn't see coming, which is why I loved it.
Yeah, because I'd heard of the Mimic tier, but I didn't really understand what that meant or how you even got it. So yeah, when I hit it as well, I was
good.
like, damn, what the fuck? And that's me.
And an arena was just the right size for a one-on-one battle. It was really
true.
cool.
That was cool.
All right, it's time to talk about the Elden Beast, eh?
Oh, wait, no, are you going to talk about your favorites?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Renala.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah,
I mean,
really
I love more,
battle.
but Renala's
let's talk
my
about
favorite.
the beast.
It was a bit easy, but it was a cool setting.
Let's talk about the beast.
About the Elden Beast. So the Elden Beast is the second phase of the last boss. The first phase is Radagon,
which I didn't mind. I don't mind that.
Oh, Radagon's awesome.
I like Radagon, absolutely.
And if you didn't know the game's biggest twist, this kind of gave you the idea, unless people didn't pay attention, which is the fact that Radagon is Marika. So the fact that the start of the cutscene that's in the B-roll at the moment, it's Marika being held up, and then she turns into Radagon. So it's just really, really cool that because you find out otherwise from doing an incantation in Lanedale, and the statue says Radagon is Marika, and which is to me just awesome because I had no idea that was going to happen. But the Elden Beast, the second phase, I know when we were doing the show, Intergot, I hadn't played the game yet, or I'd only played like the start of the game, and I know that you had a lot of issues with this boss.
Oh, this is like the hardest boss for me, but so a couple of things. I just genuinely think the Elden Beast boss is a shit boss. And it's a shit way to end the game.
Don't like it.
Like, it just kind of like you're hitting it and it runs away. I just really, truly dislike the structure of the fight. And then it was like complicated with me that because it's like the holy damage and then also like the holy
It has
damage
holy
negation.
resistance. Yeah.
It fucked me so hard because I've got the holy halberd, right, or the golden halberd. So it's like I lost so much power because of that.
But I don't understand why you were so stubborn to not
Because I
try
was at the
another weapon.
fucking last bit of the game, man. I got through. I said to myself, I want to use the first weapon to beat the game, and I'm at the fucking final boss. Come on, you
Okay.
can understand that, Swinny.
Well,
you
did
of
it
all people
yourself.
can understand
You did
that.
it yourself. No, I changed my gear for every
No,
boss,
but if
so-
you have a commitment to do something and you're at the end of the game, you can
You're
understand
gonna
that
keep
I'm like,
going.
do you know what I did? I ended up respecing my character to max everything out just for that one fight because I'm like, fuck it, like this is the final fight. I'm not gonna do anything else in this game. And I was not miserable, but I just really hated that fight, like with a passion. And I could have changed my character and easily beaten. It's not a hard boss. I think like the last boss is just like annoying, like but you know, if you're a reasonable level, it's a very straightforward boss. It's not like the super boss that we'll be talking about in a minute. But yeah, for that reason, it was difficult, and I just didn't like it. Like I again going back, I would have preferred if Godfrey was like the final boss. I know it doesn't make sense from a story perspective or whatever, but
0 sense.
yeah, but I just as a boss, like I just really liked that fight, and that would have been a cool way to end the game for me. But yeah, that was me. How about you guys? Did you beat it first go? I'm guessing.
No. Hell no. It was
Well, it had
bloody
that
annoying.
one attack that you can't dodge.
No, you can dodge.
There's got to be a way to
No,
dodge
I don't
it.
think you
I don't
can
think
dodge
they've
it. You
ever
have
made undodgeable attacks.
I don't
in
think
these
you can
games.
dodge it, Swinny. There's
What
one.
attack are you talking about?
There's one. It homes in on you, like with all these, like these sparkly
No,
things.
there's ways to dodge that.
There's got to be ways, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure
and there's
ways.
there's also ways to mitigate as well. So there's
There's ways to
different
mitigate,
options
but
there.
I thought even people said you can't necessarily dodge that attack.
Well, look, I don't remember having any issues with that. But anyway, Mike, you were about to say so.
No, nothing. It just annoying. The fact that he runs away like a little bitch, and then you have to chase him halfway through, and then he
Oh.
does that annoying attack and stuff. I don't know. I didn't find it an enjoyable boss experience. I thought it was a really cool looking boss. The aesthetics of it and the location that you fight the boss at and stuff was kind of cool, but very ethereal in many ways. But yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of this giant penis head boss thing.
I thought the design of it's really cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed this boss as a spectacle. When I talked before about music, the way that it's this in the intro cutscene that's kind of playing in our B-roll on YouTube at the moment, when it starts to move into this, and it's actually like it's basically the Elden Ring theme, but done kind of in a really kind of almost somber way, and it picks up in crescendos during certain attacks where, for instance, it creates all the runes in the sky, and then you have to then it surrounds you and everything. I love this spectacle. I love the design. I didn't have any issues from it from a gameplay standpoint because as I said, with this as a boss where I just swapped the River's Blood because I'm like, well, he's running away. I can't attack him very often with this attack. So I think that I had the luxury of just having a good build to face it. But I think it's a poorly designed boss, especially last boss, in regards to a variety of builds being able to be viable against him. Now, in saying that, a lot of Souls final bosses are quite disappointing. Like, for many people anyway, like probably Dark Souls 2 is the biggest example of that. I think what I really appreciate about this is that I love the lore behind why it appears and everything, because everyone's like, well, where is this? It's appeared out of nowhere. And it is basically, it's the manifestation of the Greater Will. And the Greater Will is the outer god that's been behind this whole thing, that people always hear the Greater Will, but it's such a generic sounding term that you just don't think of it as an entity. You know what I mean? It's like, the Greater Will. It's like some ambiguous.
What's the
concept.
manifestation of it, right?
But
I thought it's also the Elden Ring, the actual.
So, but it's basically it's not the Greater Will, but it's basically this is the Greater Will basically taking you on. After you've obviously disposed of the Marika or Radagon. But yeah, definitely, I think it's unfortunate that it's not a good boss for many people, because I think it's stunning. Musically, it's stunning.
I'm all for that part of it. I think that's a good way to put it. It's a bit annoying that legitimately some builds are so like it makes it like 3 times harder, the fight.
Yeah.
Like for me, it was like way harder because it had so much holy damage negation. So, you know, like that screwed my weapon massively. I know that like if you can equip a whole bunch of talismans and things like that to reduce holy damage.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, and effectively, like it really like gets to a point where it's not going to hurt you that much.
Yeah, like the tree sentinel gear and stuff like that is very good against holy.
So I didn't have that stuff, or I didn't equip that for whatever reason. But yeah, it was just a bit of a letdown. Like, and I'm not going to really be that pissed at the game because, you know, it's so hard to get the final boss right in games. It's kind of like a classic thing. So cool. All right. Do you want to move on to the super boss, which I did not beat, to be clear?
Yes. Yes. Right here.
Nice.
All right. Sweetie.
Yeah, so Melania is the boss that got all the attention after, you know, like the couple of weeks after the game was out, and obviously I had to catch up on all that stuff. I've called it the super boss, although she is one of, you know, a handful of them. This is the one that I think, just like Ruby Weapon in Final Fantasy VII, everyone kind of thinks of as the super boss.
I think that's fair.
And just given the fact that, you know, her moveset is so punishing, the fact that she heals on every strike and that she's got a super crazy attack that just played as I'm talking about it.
Yep.
That is
really hard to dodge.
You basically can't dodge the first 2 strikes. You got to run away, then you got to time your dodges for the remaining 3 strikes. Just incredibly punishing. Honestly, I'm not a fan of this boss. I like
2 phases.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like the bosses. I love the lore behind the boss and the character and everything like that. And the setting, all the Halleck tree is beautiful and all that. But I just think this boss is plain unfair. Like, no joke. Like, I think especially if you're not summoning, I just think this is FromSoft going a bit too far. And the main reason is the waterfowl attack is, okay, you know, there's ways around that. I just hate bosses that heal. Like, I just think I'm not a fan at all.
Especially post-patch.
Yeah. And so while everyone loves this boss, I'm actually not a big fan of this boss, although I do appreciate their place in the story and lore. So
How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I probably took 10 goes to get her, maybe even more. It wasn't easy. I tried different summons. I tried different techniques. Actually, no, it was more than that. I think it was about at least 15 goes. Different weapons, different summons. But it was weird because sometimes a summon would work well in one go, but then absolutely shit the next one. It was really inconsistent. And I mean, I personally enjoyed this fight. I couldn't really properly figure out how to avoid some of the attacks. And I think with enough time, I would have learned how to do it properly. It's just my playstyle was probably just shit against certain attacks because I am a lot more aggressive and a lot more in a boss's face. But the problem is against her with the attacks that she does, it doesn't work that well. You have to run away and dodge shit. And the fact that there's a second phase, I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? At the start, it was hard enough just to do the first phase of her. And I'm like, yeah, I did it. And then it was like, what? Are you fucking kidding me? There's a second phase for this? So, yeah. But look, it was an optional boss. And there were strategies that you can use. And I think the fact that we have a certain cracked pothead that solos her is a testament to the fact that clearly she's very much beatable. So... And she's very much beatable without being hit at all. And even with having the disadvantage of playing in multiplayer where she's even more difficult. So I didn't mind the boss. I thought it was a really cool boss. And well suited for the collector's edition as the thing to include.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, because I was listening to Fighting Cowboy, very famous Souls guide creator. And, you know, like he's creating things for not like, you know, shit players or anything like that, but it's kind of like the general comments of like, this is the easiest path to do something. And it was interesting hearing his perspective on the fight. He's just like, it's just a DPS battle. It's just a DPS battle. You got to get your build and you're like, you know, you set up right. And then it's just like attack the shit out of her, like try to stagger her, all this other kind of stuff, which is kind of a bit what you did, right, Swinny, to beat her.
Yeah. Like I use Mimic Tier, so if that's easy mode, then fair enough. To me, if there's a mechanic and there's an unfair boss, then I have no qualms using it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that pole blade just staggered the hell out of her. So I probably could have taken her down eventually just by myself, but I don't know. Like I enjoyed the cutscenes, not so much the actual gameplay of the boss. So.
Yeah, no, fair enough. All right, you want to move into story, Swinny?
Yeah, look, we don't have to go too in depth, given that we are pretty long in the tooth at the moment. But now that we're actually able to talk a bit more spoilery about it, I guess the whole question of we mentioned before about how they actually present the story. This game, it is much more straightforward than the Souls games, but at the same time, it's kind of like we were talking to I was reading all the item descriptions, and and that you just weren't, and I think that maybe, look, I just wonder how everyone else feels about the delivery of it. I love it, but I just wonder if does everyone else love the way they petered the story out.
Oh no, I loved it. Like I like I'm being a bit coy like at times. Like I did read like I don't know 5 to 10% of stuff, like so I did read some of it. I love the way that like things are written in this game. Like writing in games, in my opinion, is just so shit. But I do not feel like that at all in this world. Like everything, you go through and read it, it's like quite creative, quite enticing, quite deliberately ambiguous, and potentially confusing on purpose as well. And so no, I really liked it. I really liked all parts of it. I didn't get it all. It didn't all make sense to me. I missed out on big things.
There's definitely parts like, for instance, and some people have tried to talk about it, but I still don't understand the whole concept of why you get teleported directly to Crumbling Farum Azula after lighting the cauldron. It's like, okay, well, what is the connection there? I know you have to go get the Rune of Death so that the Erd Tree will burn properly, but it's like everything else kind of made more sense, and I'm like, I think there was a bit of a disconnect there that they're the biggest things that I didn't get myself is like, and also just Mike, you made a comment about this at some point. I can't remember if it was on the show, but there are characters that have very similar names, and for a very long time, I kept getting throughout the game confused between Godfrey and Godwin, two completely different characters that play different parts in the games. One's a boss, one's not, and everything. But I'm like, when Godfrey appeared and Horaloo, I'm like, wait, I thought he got killed, so there was definitely times when I'm very confused.
I got confused with that shit.
By that stuff, so.
I ruined the part for you, remember, Mike? Because I was like adamant. It was, oh, fuck, what are the names?
Margit and Morgott.
Yeah, and I got it the wrong way around. And I was like so adamant. I'm like, no, it's this. And then you check the wiki and you're like, oh, this is an area.
Thanks.
I'm like, thanks, dude. Go. Cheers. Appreciate it. I didn't mean it, but it was just like...
Well, that one kind of makes sense from a name perspective, but I do feel
that one does, but they're all so similar, though.
They're too similar, and I don't know if that was intentional, if
of course
George had something to do with that.
It's a GRRM.
I know. He reckons it's
so
not,
obvious.
but I feel like it was a detriment. I would actually love to play a Soul game like this that isn't quite as esoteric. I love how it's so esoteric. Bob. No, I mean more just as a general thing where the story isn't necessarily spelt out to you, but there's more character interaction and more actual story delivery that you don't have to sit there trying to figure out yourself. I would love to see what that game would be like, basically.
Well, it's funny because like if you were saying that around Dark Souls 3 time, this is the game that would have been the step up from that.
It absolutely is a step up
spells things out so much more.
Oh, totally, way more. But I'm saying I would love to kind of see a mix. I don't even know what game I would describe it as, because I don't want something like The Witcher where everything is literally completely spelt out. Much less than that.
This feels like a completely
but
different
more than
game
what this is. It would be a completely different game. But I would love to actually experience a game like that is somewhere in between the two.
Can I quickly? I named something here called the Melina issue or Melina.
what is
I should
that?
say
I don't know what
Melina
that
issue.
is.
So, well, basically, there's a lot of people that criticize the game in how they handle Melina, who they see as a very important character in the story, but she's absent for a vast majority of it for people. And a lot of people are okay. I was chatting to this main character who we're going on this quest together, and then suddenly for like 30 hours. There's been no cutscenes of her or anything like that. And I think the issue is the fact that all the dialogue with Melina, except for a couple of specific places like the churches and the in front of the frenzied flame and stuff like that, it's all on the critical path of the game. So a lot of people do is they will obviously speak to her at the start. She gives you Torrent and then takes you to Round Table Hold and all that. But people then just go off and explore, and they before even potentially getting a great rune, they've cleared out all of the Weeping Peninsula, they've cleared out Limgrave, they've gone into Caelid, they've done a bunch of Liurnia before they've even need to get a great rune. And it's not until you start progressing that Melina, like almost up until like the capital, that she becomes more of a factor again. And I think it's a shame because I think that it was a really interesting character. It's still so mysterious, like, and people don't know exactly the nature behind her and everything like that. But it's just something I just want to bring up, that it's like, I wonder if it would have been much better for them to maybe put her in the Round Table Hold at times, where you actually get get more lore from her or more interactions, because I think a lot of people are expecting her to be like the maiden of this game, the Emerald Herald, the Maiden in Black, the doll from Bloodborne, where it's ridiculous.
She feels like it.
It's ridiculous to say, but like to form a bond with that character that you're basically coming back to all the time and speaking with, and she's not that character. So I just
Did you also find that it's for a lot of people, I think it's easy to miss her dialogue if you don't go to a site of grace and actually go and see, there's an
Correct.
option there to talk to her. I reckon I missed dialogue with her.
Could
No
you actually
doubt
miss
because
it?
of that.
I didn't
Oh,
realize.
totally, yeah.
Well, yeah,
Because
you can. Sorry, you don't miss it permanently. Sorry, Mike. But it's more like you have to trigger at the site of grace, talk to Melina.
Yeah, you have to
she's
go
not just
talk to
gonna
her
appear.
at the
But
site
could
of
you
grace.
get past? Can you get through the game without getting her dialogue?
Oh, yeah, I reckon there's a whole bunch of times I didn't talk to her. No doubt, yeah.
There's a couple
Because I
of
realized
there's some forced interactions.
some are
Yeah, I thought
forced,
some are
but there's
forced,
quite a few
yeah.
that aren't. That you have to actually
Oh,
go to
I
the many.
didn't-
Same as Rani, which we'll probably talk about in a sec. There's a few points where you can interact with her at a site of grace that you can totally miss.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, I didn't have an issue, but I think maybe that's because I just played it a lot quicker, right? So
Yeah.
for me, it was like more frequent that I'd. It was more like it was almost marking chapters or whatever, however you want to phrase
Yeah.
it. You know what I
Okay,
mean? So
yeah,
it's like,
makes sense.
whoa, okay, she's back again. Okay, I'm up to a bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas I'd imagine if you played twice as long as I have, you just
Yes.
completely forgotten about her. And
Dude,
it's like, oh, who are you
totally.
again, bitch?
Totally. I'm like, oh, wait,
Yeah.
she's a character in this. Shit.
Yeah, so I definitely did not have that experience. And I'm someone who's like, I kind of forget the characters. So for me, it was like very. It's also because the game feels so different in the cutscenes that it's so distinct. You know, like I definitely notice it. So I like the character a lot. So yeah, it's interesting. And I didn't get her ending, if that makes sense. So I've seen like short
Where's
like
your
videos and stuff like that of it. So it seems interesting.
Yeah, and look, we don't do. I don't know if we want to, considering how long we've gone. I don't know if we want to talk too in depth about endings, but I liked them. I think that there's three kind of main ones and like four variations of one of them that is like just slightly altered. But what my favorite thing about the endings was the stuff you had to do to earn those endings were really interesting. You know, everything around fear and the deathbed companion and all the the curse mark or whatever, like to get that ending, everything to do with the Lord of Frenzied Flame, which is just really, really cool.
That was a cool one. Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, and the
I like
fact
that.
That's the most distinct one, right?
Yeah, because you physically are different
Rani's
as well.
Rani's very
Rani's
distinct.
probably the
It's
most
involved.
distinctive
Yeah.
ending, but to
Yeah.
me, the Lord of Frenzy's Flame was distinctive
Yeah.
because for the rest of the game, your character was totally different.
Yeah, and I love
Which
that
is
that there was a way to remove it, but you had to work for it, things like that. But yeah, look, I liked them, but I mean, these Souls games have never had very elaborate endings, anyway. So.
That was my gripe. So my gripe was, I think because I ended up I thoroughly tried to do everything I could, I got lucky enough that I could do all the endings, or at least I think it was all the endings.
I did them all except the Golden Order one because I missed a step in the quest line there. So
But because I was a bit of a whore when it comes to this. I don't normally care about trophies. I don't normally care about achievements. But I heard you say, hey, why don't you just do the Safe Cloud thing and try to get all the different endings? And I'm like, hey, that's a cool way to actually experience the different endings without having to go to YouTube. And I did try all the different endings, and I was a little disappointed that, other than a 1 minute or something cutscene, there was no difference really in the feel of the endings.
But it's not meant to be experienced though.
I
I
know.
know you can do it. It's a bit of
I
a
know that,
known hack, but
I'd still be disappointed if I replayed the entire game and then had a slight different variation to the whole thing. I'd be like, it's a bit. I did all this work in this particular quest to get to this particular point, that it would have been cool just to have something more, or maybe
Like-
a unique item, or I
like-
don't know, something different.
like Dung Eater's ending should have been like, it should have just been more than a palette swap and a slight dialogue change for that, because it's so fucked up. It's like But look, at least they're getting better. They're getting better. Like Sekiro was probably the best game they've done in regards to that, like narrative and like endings and things, and the way they deliver it. But I think that this is a step up for the Souls games. But 100%, like it wasn't too far from Mass Effect for those variations. But I liked the fact that the unique stuff for Rani, because that quest was so involved and so many
Super
steps.
involved. Probably
That
the
if they did a color swap for
biggest.
Rani, that would be very disappointing. So. Yeah.
so we're gonna skip talking about all the side quests.
Yeah,
Maybe
look.
What about talk about your favorite? Talk about your
Yeah,
favorite
yeah.
side quest each. Yeah. So I'll go first, I guess. So
Yeah.
my favorite isn't even on the list that we have.
Yep.
From a role playing perspective, I really liked Sorceress Selen's side
Yeah.
quest. I just loved how you come across her. I loved the twists, if you could call them that, about her not being in her actual body. I loved the feeling of being in this world and having someone guide you, and you being her apprentice. And I know that you're not. It doesn't really get that involved per se, but I love the role playing part of that, if that makes sense, of having this cool sage that mentors you throughout these things. And as much as it was, it's kind of bittersweet, but the ending was really fucking sad. So you I don't know if you did. Did you guys? You guys?
I did, yeah.
Did
Yeah,
you
it
do
was-
it as
yeah.
well, Antigone? It was a really weird ending, but it was just really sad. So she
Yeah.
gets turned into this like, and I don't know what the lore behind that is, but you meet those enemies. And it's like an amalgamation of multiple sorcerers that were not cursed. I don't know what the lore is. They were basically.
Yeah, I think there's speculation two ways, and I think one of them definitely seems like more obvious to me. The more obvious one is that is the output of her working on the primeval glintstone path. Like that's what she got barred from the academies, because she was working on those kind of like almost like blasphemous sorceries, and that is the actual end result, is actually becoming like that. And the other one is Renala doing that, but I don't believe the Renala one, because it's like Renala is just a shell of herself. She doesn't care about anyone else. Like it's like, to me, that is almost like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, that one, Selen wanting to essentially go down that path and ends up just becoming that. So
Yeah, I read that. I interpreted it something like that as well. I interpreted it. Well, I wasn't sure if it was a curse that was bestowed on her by something else, or it's almost a metaphor that if you dwell too deep into seeking knowledge, you end up like that. And it's super sad, because if you actually look really carefully at the character model of that, so you would have come across these enemies into God. It's like these spherical things that have multiple faces on
Oh
them.
yeah, that's such a
And
cool
it's the
design.
faces of the
Yeah,
mage things. If you actually look, you can see what I believe is
Glintstones,
her
right?
face
Okay.
as one of them merged in with the rest of them. And I just found that super sad as like an ending to a quest like that. That to me was still one of the most memorable parts of the game, or quests within the game that surpassed the actual main quest of the game itself.
Yeah.
So I really liked it.
Look, Rani's quest is fucking phenomenal. I'm not gonna lie. Like that is From have never done anything like that at all. Like this is a quest line that not only leads to major ending, but has major bosses, major areas that you wouldn't be able to get to.
Yeah,
Huge
how
areas.
insane is that? Yeah.
Like all the like the eternal cities, all that shit. It's nuts. But probably my personal favorite quest is actually everything to do with Volcano Manor, specifically Raya, the girl. And I didn't get her first part of the quest, and I've seen it what happens afterwards. So I met her in the Volcano Manor. And just the absolute surprise when you walk in after a while and you're like, she's a fucking lizard, and it was just the most
Yeah.
unexpected thing. And then you talk to her and she's just like cute and gentle lizard, but it's like, oh no, you can't, I forgot to change it back. And it's just such
Yeah.
a
really
such
cute.
an amazing moment.
Lizard
And
people.
With a
like,
few memes and stuff.
and the way that her quest plays out as well. And it's honestly, I like obscure quest lines of FromSoftware games. It's a shame this one is really obscure, because I think a lot of people aren't probably going to see it to its end, where you find her in like a bit of a hidden area in the Volcano Manor, and she like wants you to kill her and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
I didn't find her. At
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Point.
And
it was a shame I missed it.
but you can, you can get to a point where she actually leaves and goes off an adventure and thanks you and everything. So it's one of the few rare quests that has a positive outcome, which was really cool.
Good
But I just
point.
love that character, so it's super memorable.
Really cool character. It's actually because I left a bunch of messages on the ground, and some, I mean, not major, like 50, 60 upvotes or something. But one of the ones that got upvoted the most was "Didn't expect lizard." I think I wrote in front of her when I saw her, and obviously people like that one, so
Yeah.
I upvoted it.
The other thing I wanted to say to add to the side quest is I'm still very conflicted about the signposting of what's next or what the clue is. Because I just don't understand, like, unless you guys just, like, literally checked certain elements, it's like, where do I need to go next? Like, what's going on here? Like, how you can actually piece it all together. Because some of it is so cryptic. It's like, fuck me. Like,
That's why I did miss. Like I missed that bit. I had when
Yeah.
I got the potion of forgetfulness or whatever. I couldn't find her. I had no idea where she
Yeah.
was, and I think I finished the game and I still couldn't figure out where she was.
I'm-
And
I'm-
other stuff is cryptic, but you can figure it out. So I think with the sell-in quest.
but you have to write it down or something. Because it's
No,
like,
well, you
well, where's
do,
it
or you
logged?
have
It's not
to.
logged anywhere. It's like, once
It's
they
not,
say
but
this
you
shit,
just have to remember
it's
shit.
done.
So, no, stuff like that is actually, it's not, no. So for example, with that one where you find her body in Rennie's Rise, I think, somewhere around there, and it's hidden. You have to sort of, it's a hidden wall in a hidden area kind of thing. But there is actually, I think, a clue, and I don't know if it was something I bought from a merchant.
There's
or something
there's a
that
note
talks
that tells
about-
you about Celovus's hidden cellar. near the
yeah,
rises
and then you're like,
stuff, yeah.
oh, okay. So I explored that, and then I found that thing there, and I'm like, okay, I see this is related to that quest, but not because I knew that was related to the quest, but because I read the note, went and explored there, and then I stumbled across the rest of the quest. If that makes sense.
I'm torn, because I definitely think you're right, Indigot. Like, there's a lot of times where things just will be said, and if you don't remember it, and this is a long ass game,
Yeah.
and if you leave that quest and come back 50 hours later, like, you've
You're
got to
gonna
have a
forget
damn
it.
good memory. That is a shame. But the thing for me, the reason I'm torn is because the more that you have, like, maybe a log or a last thing they said, the closer this gets to becoming like every other open world game.
Yeah.
And I think the part of it as well is that that's what leads into that community aspect that I really what other game does this? It's like Zelda having those bushes you can burn. You wouldn't fucking find that yourself, you know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I kind of almost like that mystery, but you're right. There's a lot of stuff that just is you would never find out, or you would have to be incredibly lucky or like have a great memory to be able to figure it out. So
Yeah, it's interesting that they added the NPCs to the map, right? And they didn't have that before. Like, I do feel like
That helped with some.
it's a little bit of their reflection of like maybe this is more obscure than we thought it was going to be executed. And I'm not saying much. Like, I just feel like there's just a little bit of a and maybe it's a little bit my bad as well because I'm not engaging enough with the extra shit in the game. So
but like Millicent, for instance, so you'll follow her quest line and she'll appear at places, and some of them it's like, okay, that makes sense, and one of them she's like off from where a site of grace is, that if you've already explored that area, you might not walk over that direction.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, I do wish that some of the NPCs that travel on their quests to different areas, I do wish that they moved them a little bit closer to like critical paths that you would retread all the time. So anyway, quests are great in this game.
Oh yeah, amazing. I think let's skip the DLC speculation because it will come up because they're gonna have DLC.
Yeah.
Tell you what it's gonna be. It's that middle bit in between all the towers where the clouds are. Right there. I'm calling it now.
I will say FromSoft never do the obvious DLC.
That's
so
true.
We'll see.
That's what it
Yeah,
will
everyone's
be.
like, oh, it's going to be
calling it now.
PvP Cauldron or something like that. So,
I hope not.
all right. As we said, we gave this game, what was it? 95, 96, 97. So, absolutely
game.
amazing game. Play the
this
game. It's going to be game of the year. Let's just not even let's just do game of the year, but like we'll already put it in. It's game of the year. What's going to come second? Second is now the game of the year.
That's what I was going to say. It's a Bigwig's
Game of the Year.
Elden Ring presents Bigwig's Game of the Year.
Pretty much. Like,
runner-up or something.
if there's another game that gets
of the
released
year.
this year that's better than it, holy fuckeroni. Like, what a game that's going to be, right? Like, the only game I thought for
Starfield.
me could have been up there was like Breath of the Wild 2, potentially. Like,
Starfield.
if Breath of the Wild and then you add the actual dungeons in there, it's like, whoa, that's insane, right? I like how Joe Jives is still watching and he actually said, is
What?
Elden Ring any good?
Nah. Shit, don't worry about
I've
it.
been shitting on it for a while.
You got to rewatch the whole 3 hours.
But wait, if you watched all of this, he's not. Are you even
Well,
going
we
to play
have
the game then, Joe?
chat on the game a lot.
Plus, we've given you all the spoilers, so.
Well,
Lucky it's the kind of game where spoilers don't
Don't really
matter.
in a way, yeah.
But yeah.
Well, it's a good thing we didn't put our review in a normal podcast episode then. Let me just
That's
say
true.
that.
That's true. All right. Well, why don't we say goodbye? Sign off after almost 3 hours.
Jesus.
Play Elden Ring.
Play it. Laters.
Later.